Hi, I'm Soph. I'm 28 and doing well in my marketing job, and I'm married to Jhony, a great guy who's 30 and a successful software engineer. We were living our dream, or so I thought, when we first got married. I wanted to be the perfect daughter-in-law. Jhony's parents, Linda and Robert, seemed nice at first. I brought homemade pies to family dinners, helped with the dishes, and listened to Linda's long stories about her book club. But then, Linda would correct me on little things, like how to fold napkins. "Oh, Soph dear," she'd say, "that's not how we do it here." I would just smile and nod, trying to ignore it. Jhony said, "That's just how Mom is. Don't take it personally." But it wasn't just the napkins. Linda had an opinion on everything: our jobs, our home, even how often we visited. One day, I told my best friend Sarah about it. "They sound like a nightmare," she said. "How does Jhony not see this?" I sighed and explained that he thought I was overreacting. Sarah said, "You need to set some boundaries." Every time I tried to talk to Jhony, he would defend his mom. "They're just trying to help," he'd say. Then came Thanksgiving. Linda called to say she would host dinner this year. "I know you offered, Soph, but you're still learning how to entertain," she said sweetly. I bit my tongue and agreed. She added, "Oh, and bring a homemade pumpkin pie, no store-bought. And please come early to help set up." I hung up, feeling angry. Jhony walked in and asked what was wrong. I hesitated but finally said, "It's just Linda's demands and constant criticism. I feel like nothing I do is good enough." Jhony sighed. "She's just old-fashioned, Soph. It's her way of caring." I couldn't believe it. "Caring? She makes me feel terrible half the time." "Let's not fight about this. It's just one dinner. We'll get through it, okay?" Jhony said. I nodded, but inside, I was dreading Thanksgiving. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to be family can be the most toxic. Thanksgiving Day arrived, and Jhony and I drove to his parents' house. I held the homemade pumpkin pie, hoping it would meet Linda's high expectations. "Ready?" Jhony asked, squeezing my hand. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, forcing a smile. We walked in, and Linda immediately spotted the pie. "Oh, Soph, you actually made it yourself? How quaint." I bit my tongue and went to the kitchen to help. During dinner, the tension was thick. Linda took a bite of my pie and made a face. "Well, it's interesting. Maybe next time you could try using a proper recipe." That was it. I'd had enough. "Linda, I followed your recipe exactly. If you don't like it, just say so instead of making these passive-aggressive comments." The table went silent. Linda's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me? I'm only trying to help you improve. You clearly need it." "Help me? You've done nothing but criticize and put me down since I married Jhony." Linda gasped dramatically. "How dare you, Robert? Are you hearing this?" Robert jumped in. "Now, Soph, that's no way to speak to your mother-in-law. Apologize, right now." I looked at Jhony, hoping he'd back me up, but he just stared at his plate. My voice shaking, I said, "I will not apologize for standing up for myself." Linda stood up and pointed at the door. "Get out, both of you. I won't tolerate such disrespect in my house." Finally, Jhony spoke. "Mom, come on, this is ridiculous. Don't you dare take her side." "Jhony," Linda yelled, "choose right now, us or her." Jhony looked at me, then at his parents. He stood up and took my hand. "Let's go, Soph." We drove in silence to a nearby hotel. Once we were in our room, the reality of what happened hit me, and I started crying. Jhony held me and said, "I'm so sorry, Soph. I should have stood up to them sooner." "Why didn't you?" I asked between sobs. Jhony sighed. "I guess I was in denial about how bad things had gotten. I kept hoping if we just tried harder." "Jhony, we shouldn't have to try harder. They're the problem, not us." We spent the night talking, really talking for the first time in months, about his parents, our marriage, and everything in between. "We need to set some serious boundaries," I said. "I can't keep living like this." Jhony nodded. "You're right. No more excuses. From now on, we're a team. My parents will either respect that, or they'll have to deal with the consequences." As we lay in that hotel room, I felt both sad and relieved. Sad that it had come to this, but relieved that Jhony finally understood. "What do we do now?" I asked. Jhony pulled me closer. "We start over. We'll build our own traditions. And maybe my parents will come around, but if they don't, we'll be okay." I nodded, feeling stronger than I had in months. This Thanksgiving had been a disaster, but it was also a turning point. No more pretending everything was perfect. Jhony and I decided we had enough. We cut ties with his parents and focused on rebuilding our lives, free from their toxic influence. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. We found a cute little apartment across town, far from his parents' neighborhood. We spent weekends painting and decorating, making it truly our own. No Linda criticizing our color choices, no Robert making rude comments about our furniture. It felt like we could finally breathe. Work became my escape. I threw myself into my projects, and it paid off. One day, my boss called me into her office. "Soph, your performance has been outstanding. We'd like to offer you a promotion to senior marketing manager." I was over the moon. When I told Jhony, he picked me up and spun me around the living room. "I'm so proud of you, Soph," he said, smiling from ear to ear. Jhony was doing great too. He started a side project, developing an app for local businesses, and it really took off. "Babe, I just got another client," he'd shout, and we'd do our silly victory dance in the kitchen. Our relationship grew stronger, we talked more, laughed more, and it finally felt like we were a team, facing the world together. Then, about 6 months after Thanksgiving, everything changed. Jhony got a call from his mom. "What do you mean, gambling addiction?" he asked, his face going pale. I could only hear his side of the conversation, but it was enough to know something was wrong. Apparently, Robert had a secret gambling problem, and it had gotten out of control. They were about to lose their house. When Jhony hung up, he looked shocked. They lost everything. Soph, the house, their savings, everything. I felt a mix of emotions, shock, a little bit of satisfaction, I'm only human, and dread, because I knew what was coming. Sure enough, the next day, Linda called Jhony. He put it on speaker. "Jhony, darling," she said sweetly, "your father and I are in a bit of trouble. We were wondering if we could stay with you and Soph for a while, just until we get back on our feet. Rent-free. Of course, you wouldn't charge your own parents, would you?" Jhony looked at me, clearly torn. I don't know, Mom, we'd have to talk about it." After he hung up, Jhony turned to me. "Soph, I know things have been bad, but they're still my parents. Maybe if we help them, they'll realize how wrong they were. Maybe we can fix things." I took a deep breath. "Jhony, honey, I know you want to help, but think about everything they put us through, the criticism, the manipulation, kicking us out on Thanksgiving, and now they want to move in, rent-free?" "But they're family," he said softly. "Family doesn't treat each other the way they treated us," I replied. "If we let them move in, we'll be right back where we started. All the progress we've made, all the peace we've found, it'll be gone." Jhony was quiet for a long time, then he nodded slowly. "You're right, God, you're right. I can't believe I even thought about it. It's just, they're my parents, you know?" I hugged him tightly. "I know, babe, and it's awful that they've put you in this position, but we need to protect ourselves, our relationship, and the life we've built. You're right, no more toxic influences. We've come too far to go back now." As we stood in our little apartment, I felt both relieved and sad. Relieved that we were sticking to our boundaries, but sad that it had come to this. Still, I knew we were making the right choice. Sometimes, the hardest decisions are the ones that help us grow the most. Jhony made the call to his parents and put it on speaker. "Mom, Dad, we've talked it over, and we can't let you move in with us," he said. Linda's voice immediately became sharp. "What? How could you do this to us? We're your parents." "I'm sorry, but it's just not possible," Jhony replied firmly. "This is all Soph's doing, isn't it?" Linda snapped. "She's turned you against us." I couldn't stay silent any longer. "Linda, this was our decision. Your behavior has consequences." "How dare you?" she screamed. "After everything we've done for you." "You mean like kicking us out on Thanksgiving?" I shot back. The call ended with Linda threatening to tell the whole family how awful we were, but we were done being manipulated. We decided to host a housewarming party, inviting extended family and friends. It was time to set the record straight. During the party, Jhony's cousin, Amy, approached me. "Hey, Soph, is it true you refused to help Linda and Robert because you're jealous of their relationship?" I was stunned. "What? No, absolutely not. Where did you hear that?" Amy looked uncomfortable. "Linda's been telling everyone that you're trying to come between them and Jhony." That was the last straw. I gathered everyone's attention. "I need to clear something up," I said. "Linda and Robert have been spreading lies about us. I told them everything, the constant criticism, the Thanksgiving disaster, the manipulation." Jhony chimed in, explaining more about his dad's gambling addiction. The room fell silent. Then, Jhony-san spoke up. I always thought Linda exaggerated about you, Soph. I'm so sorry we believed her. As the party continued, more family members came up to us, apologizing and sharing their own stories of Linda's manipulation. A week later, we got a call from Jhony's cousin. You won't believe this, she said. Linda and Robert are being evicted. Turns out Robert owes money to some shady people, and they might even face legal trouble. Jhony sighed. Part of me feels guilty, he said. I squeezed his hand. We can't set ourselves on fire to keep them warm. They made their choices. That evening, we reaffirmed our commitment to each other and the boundaries we had set. No more toxic influences. No more manipulation. Meanwhile, Jhony and I were thriving. My career was taking off, and Jhony's app business was booming. We even started talking about having kids. One night, as we sat on our balcony watching the sunset, Jhony turned to me and said, "You know, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful for that Thanksgiving disaster. It opened my eyes. It was hard, but look at us now, we're stronger because of it. No more pretending everything's perfect, just us, building our life on our terms." As the sun set and the sky darkened, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Our story wasn't about revenge, it was about standing up for ourselves, setting boundaries, and choosing happiness. Sometimes, the best way to move forward is simply by living well. Now that our story is over, I have a question for you. Was I wrong to refuse to help my in-laws, even after everything they put us through, despite their serious financial troubles? Where do you draw the line between family loyalty and taking care of yourself? Should we always help family, no matter how toxic they've been? Or is it okay to protect our own mental health and happiness? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What would you do in this situation? If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything to me and helps me keep sharing real-life experiences. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.
Frances walked past a row of fences to reach her mother's grave. The cemetery was dark and eerie, with only the sound of howling wind and cawing crows. Frances stopped near a familiar grave and wiped her mother's picture from the dust, feeling as if her warm, radiant eyes were smiling at her. Overwhelmed with emotion, Frances cried out, "Hello, Mummy. Yesterday I went to the police again, but they chased me away. It seems like the person who hit you is either rich or connected to the police, as everything was hushed up so quickly. They know I'm alone and don't have the money for a good lawyer. But don't think I've given up. No, I'm determined to find out the name of the person who took your life. Otherwise, I won't be able to live a normal life. Mummy, I feel so lost without you. Why is life so unfair? Why did you have to leave so early? You left me all alone in this world. May you rest in peace. I should go now. I have to wake up early for work tomorrow." Tears clouded Frances's eyes and she barely made it home, barely seeing where she was going. She felt cold and longed for a cup of hot tea, but her hands were too weak to lift anything. The sadness overwhelmed her, and she collapsed onto the old, worn-out sofa, bursting into tears once again, yearning for her most beloved and closest person. Frances's childhood could hardly be described as happy. She grew up alone with her mother in an old house that resembled more of a barn. The walls were cracked and barely held together, the water supply intermittent, and the roof leaked. Frances's mother, Magda, worked as a cleaner in a roadside cafe. The work was very hard, the pay was meagre, and it was a long way to get there. Nothing was known about her father. Frances's mother did not answer any questions about him and only cried, so Frances stopped bothering her. The girl never had any good things, gadgets or fancy toys. That is why Frances hated school. She was called names and disliked there. In the back they constantly shouted, "Beggar! Look guys, she has holes in her sweater sewn up." The girl studied quite well and finished school almost perfectly. Her mum persuaded her to try to enroll in college, giving 1,000 arguments. "Honey, just look at me. Do you want to repeat my fate? Being a janitor all your life? You're smart. At least try to get in. If you get an education, you'll find a good job. But if not, you'll be stuck working for pennies your whole life. While Frances doubted whether to enroll or not, life made its terrible adjustments. Once in the middle of the night, Frances woke up to find the room filled with acrid smoke and the kitchen on fire. The girl remained calm. She broke the window, miraculously managed to pull out her almost unconscious mother, and jumped out behind herself. Neighbours rushed over, frantically attempting to extinguish the fire, but their efforts were in vain. When the fire brigade arrived, everything was over. The old wooden house burned to the ground like a dry match. In just one night, Frances and her mum were left with nothing. No home, no belongings, and no documents. Clad only in their nightgowns and robes, they sobbed and embraced each other. Though others tried to console them, reminding them that they were fortunate to be alive, the women were filled with terror. They wondered how, and more importantly, where they would live now. Frances's mother tirelessly sought assistance from various authorities, hoping to secure housing. However, all she received were disappointing responses. They told her that the house had long been deemed unsafe, and since she had declined previous opportunities to relocate, they had no obligation to provide her with a new place. Magda and her daughter had no choice but to rent a small, one-room apartment on the outskirts of the city and slowly rebuild their lives, including obtaining new documents. They were grateful for the kindness of those who supported them, as otherwise they would have been left with nothing. Following this incident, Frances made a decision. "No, Mum, I don't have time to go to college now. I'm going to work and help you. We'll manage together." Unfortunately, trouble seemed to follow them. On that fateful evening, Frances was waiting for her mother to return from work. She made her favourite dish, fried potatoes with mushrooms. However, darkness had already fallen, but her mother still hadn't arrived, and the girl grew increasingly worried. Her mother had never been late before, and she had no plans to go anywhere. Why was she taking so long? A sense of heaviness and anxiety weighed on Frances, and then the police called her with devastating news. Her mother was dead. She had been fatally struck by a hit-and-run driver while crossing the road. The unfortunate woman passed away without regaining consciousness. In a state of stupor, Frances went to identify her mother's body. She lost consciousness 3 times, barely recognizing her loved one in such a terrible state. The details of the funeral and wake were a blur, as if she had been heavily sedated the entire time. Neighbours from the street and her mother's colleagues helped with the funeral expenses. At the cemetery, whispers of sympathy filled the air. Poor Frances, how sad! Life was already difficult for her, and now, alone without her mother's care, without money, she will surely be lost. This grief weighed heavily on Frances, and the bitterest part was that the hit-and-run case was quickly closed without a thorough investigation. A year had passed and Frances found herself wandering from one office to another, desperately seeking justice. But she was met with indifference at every turn. Frances urgently needed to find a job in order to support herself, but it wasn't easy. Without education or experience, she struggled to find decent employment. She ended up working as a cleaning lady at a company that specialized in personnel hiring. The salary was small, and the work was far from suitable for a young and beautiful girl. However, Frances was grateful to have at least a job to pay for her apartment and buy food. The employees at the firm looked at her with bewilderment and condescension, unable to comprehend why a young and attractive girl would resort to such work. Amidst her sad thoughts, after visiting the cemetery, Frances fell asleep late. The next morning she reluctantly headed back to her unloved job. The monotony and hopelessness were suffocating her. Poverty had plagued her since childhood, and she saw no way out of it. Around lunchtime, a respectable gentleman in his 30s entered the office. He was tall, dignified, with a penetrating gaze and a strong chin. Frances couldn't help but admire him, as she had only seen men like him in movies. In real life, she had encountered aimless young men without any drive, whom she easily dismissed. The man approached her and asked, "Good afternoon. Can you tell me where the director's office is?" He held a beautiful expensive leather briefcase and a black folder with documents in his hands. Frances blushed and managed to respond, "Hello, you need to go to the second floor and turn left. It's the first door on your left." The man nodded and stared at Frances for a long time as if evaluating her. This look made the girl shiver. She sighed dreamily, thinking to herself, "If only such a handsome man would marry me." But she immediately warned herself, "I dreamed too much. Handsome men don't marry cleaning girls." A couple of hours passed, and Frances started cleaning the restrooms. Suddenly, in the men's room, on the windowsill, she found the black folder that the visitor had been holding. He must have forgotten it. Frances dropped her cleaning tools, took off her gloves, grabbed the documents, and ran to the director's office. Timidly, she knocked and said, "A visitor who had recently come to you forgot a folder. He was tall, handsome, and wearing a dark blue suit. Please give it to him." The director smiled and said, "Ah, so this is Mario Cohen, our co-founder. Thank you, Frances, I'll call him now." For some reason, Frances's heart fluttered and she remained standing in place, smiling foolishly. The director laughed and said, "Why are you standing there? Go back to work." At the end of the workday, Frances changed clothes and was about to leave when she heard a voice behind her. "Thank you for returning the folder with documents. If they had fallen into the wrong hands, I can't even imagine what would have happened. My name is Mario, and you're Frances. I've already been informed." "Well, Frances, have you finished? Then let's go to the restaurant for dinner. I must thank you. Refusal is not accepted." Frances blushed, feeling embarrassed in her old, out-of-fashion sweater and cheap jeans. "Thank you, but I'm not comfortable," she mumbled. "I'm not ready for a restaurant, and to be honest, I've never been to one. Maybe some other time." However, Mario commanded, "I don't like to be contradicted. Don't worry, we'll improve your appearance on the way. Get in the car." Frances didn't dare to argue with this authoritative gentleman and got into the expensive car with stiff legs. She remained silent and blinked her eyes, not knowing where she was being taken or what would happen next. The driver stopped near a fashionable boutique. Mario resolutely took Frances's hand and led her inside. He smiled charmingly at the salespeople and said, "Good afternoon. I need to take this princess to the restaurant right away. Dress her beautifully, as you know how to do." The salespeople seemed to know this client well. They quickly brought dresses and shoes to the fitting room and dressed up Frances. In just 10 minutes, a beautiful girl emerged from the fitting room, wearing a warm, tight, peach-coloured dress that fit perfectly, high boots that accentuated her slender legs, and a coffee-coloured coat and small leather handbag that completed the look. Frances couldn't believe her eyes. She had never owned such stylish and expensive things. However, she was also discouraged because she knew they cost a fortune by her standards. There was no way she could afford to pay for them. The evening was unforgettable. Slow and pleasant music filled the luxurious restaurant. Frances felt like she was in a fairy tale. She had grown up in poverty and had never experienced such a luxurious life. She felt like Cinderella brought to the ball by a handsome prince. She was afraid that midnight would strike and everything would disappear, just like in the story. Mario looked at her, and she felt her heart skip a beat. They had a nice and relaxed conversation. He told her many interesting things about his travels abroad. Frances realized that she had fallen in love, completely and irrevocably. She hung on to every word Mario said, and he seemed more and more exalted in her eyes. When they parted, Mario swept her into his arms and kissed her passionately. He whispered, "I'll call you soon, dear Frances. Don't forget about me. You have no idea how amazing you looked at the restaurant. It pleased me." So they started meeting each other from time to time. Usually, Mario would call in the afternoon to set up a date. Then the courier would bring flowers and an expensive outfit, and they would go out together and have fun. After a month, Mario unexpectedly took Francis to a 5-star hotel. They entered a luxurious suite, and Mario began kissing Francis and gently pushing her towards the large bed. He whispered sweet words to her, calling her his tender beloved and most desired. "Wait, I can't, I'm afraid," Francis whispered back. But Mario reassured her, saying, "I understand. Don't be afraid. I love you, and everything will be fine. But don't you want this too? I can sense it." Francis hesitated, unable to resist. Though a part of her knew this was all wrong and shouldn't be happening, her heart yearned for his affection and love. A couple of months passed in this fairy tale-like scenario until Francis started feeling terribly nauseous in the mornings. She constantly felt tired and had a strong urge to sleep. Initially, she thought it might be food poisoning. However, when these symptoms persisted every day for a month, she became scared and decided to see a doctor. The diagnosis shocked her. She was pregnant, and most likely with twins. She didn't know whether to rejoice or cry. She and Mario had never discussed having children, and their meetings had only taken place in the hotel. She had no idea how he would react to this news. Anxiously, she awaited their next date. As soon as Mario called her, he could tell something was wrong. He asked her directly, "What happened? You look pale. You have dark circles under your eyes. Have you been crying?" Francis swallowed hard and confessed, "Mario, please don't get upset. I'm pregnant. Here are the ultrasound results. It's still early, but it appears that twins are on the way. They're your babies too, right? I'm so scared." Mario recoiled and grasped his head, exclaiming, "What a fool you are! Were you born yesterday? I thought you were using protection. There are special pills available now. This is all so embarrassing, baby. Look, maybe it's not too late to get rid of it. I'll find a good doctor who can do it anonymously and carefully. I'll take care of all the expenses. I'm at the peak of my career, and I'm going abroad soon. I don't want kids yet. Don't get me wrong. And you're still so young. 2 is such a burden. Be smart. Listen to me. Do as I say. We're fine the way we are. Why complicate such an easy relationship? You must understand that I won't marry you. I just won't be understood in high society." Francis sat there, heartbroken. She never expected such cynicism from the man she loved. She cried and pleaded, "Mario, I don't want to terminate it. These are living beings. Why are you even with me if you didn't want to get married? I thought you loved me and that we were serious." Suddenly Mario replied sharply and harshly, "Don't be ridiculous, baby. Am I not doing enough for you? Is something lacking? This is life, not a fairy tale. Yes, I like you, and yes, I'm happy with you, but don't expect more. I've said it all. Either you do as I suggested, and we continue seeing each other as before, or you can live your life as you please, but without me. And don't try to blackmail me with illegitimate children. I won't acknowledge them. Think, and think hard." Francis ran out of the restaurant in tears and walked home. She sobbed and resented. Jerk! Such a jerk! To him, I'm just a girl for pleasure, a beautiful doll and nothing more. What a fool I've been. A businessman and a washerwoman. It's really ridiculous. God, what am I going to do? How am I going to support 2 kids on my own? It's so disgusting and revolting. I mean nothing to Mario. I wish I had never met him at all. But how can I live without his touch, his lips, his tenderness? How can I make myself forget him? He tamed me like a stray puppy and then threw me out of his life. The next day after work, Francis went to the cemetery to visit her mother. She fell to her knees and sobbed beside her mother's grave. Mummy, I'm so lost. I've fallen into a trap. I thought I had captured happiness by the tail, but it has turned into a disaster. Mummy, what can I do? I'm following in your footsteps. What will I tell my children? Where is their father? How will I manage with two? And maybe Mario is right, and I should do as he said. Why won't you say anything? Please tell me. Suddenly the sky darkened, and a strong gust of wind blew, followed by a downpour that seemed to come out of nowhere. The girl was frightened by the eerie and mystical atmosphere. She crossed herself and whispered, I understand now, Mum. I won't go against your wishes. I won't harm the children. I will endure everything. This is my fate. Thank you for your guidance, my dear. As Frances walked back home, the sky cleared and the sun peeked out. It seemed like the usual changeable spring weather, nothing out of the ordinary. But the girl was certain that all of this had had a more in-depth meaning. She knew her mother believed in her and would never agree to getting rid of the babies. She would face the challenge and find joy in having two little blessings. When Frances called Mario to inform him of her decision to keep the children, he abruptly hung up the phone and disappeared from her life forever, going abroad on a long business trip. Homesickness and depression overwhelmed the girl as she desperately missed him. Her mind understood that he was a scoundrel and their relationship had no future, but her heart betrayed her, longing for his sweet embrace. Soon her co-workers learned about her situation. The news spread, and jokes and laughter followed. They whispered, "Our cleaning lady went off the rails and got pregnant by some unknown man. How disgraceful!" Washing floors all day long became increasingly difficult for Frances. She grew tired and counted down the days until her maternity leave. She ate very little, trying to save money for the birth of her children. As a result, her belly wasn't very big, despite carrying twins. After going on maternity leave, life became even more difficult for her. The girl took the place of her retired cleaning lady to clean the territory of her apartment building, even though it was unbearable. One day, overwhelmed with despair, hopelessness and tiredness, she sat down on a frozen bench with a groan. Her back ached, sweat streamed down her back, and Frances suddenly cried out as she looked at the steam rising from her rough red hands. Nearby, a homeless man lingered near the dumpster, his age indistinguishable due to a tangled beard and a hat pulled down over his eyes. He approached Frances and timidly asked, "What are you doing, sister? Mopping floors while pregnant? You shouldn't be doing this. Why are you crying?" Frances had so much on her mind that she poured out her heart to this stranger. "I can't take it any more. I've been unlucky since birth. I lived with my mother in a hut, then it burnt down. My mum was run over by some scumbag on a crosswalk. I had to become a cleaner myself, but I met a rich businessman on the way. He beckoned me with a beautiful life and sweet speeches. I was a naive fool, and when I got pregnant he left me. How am I supposed to live? I have no savings, and I'm so tired of fighting for a piece of bread. I'm sorry that I'm blowing your mind, but I needed to express myself. I need to go." She stood up, but the homeless man inquired, "What's your name, sister? Where do you live?" Frances hesitated, but replied, "I'm Frances. I rent an apartment in the corner building, number 44. Why are you asking? And what's your name?" The homeless man exclaimed, "I'm Tom. Wait here. I'll be right back. I'll help you as much as I can. Keep your head up." Frances waved her hand, doubting that a homeless man could truly help her. She wandered back home. As she finished her tea in the kitchen, the doorbell rang. She opened the door, surprised by the unexpected visitor. It was Tom, standing on the doorstep with a bag of food and vitamins. "Here, take this. It's food. Vitamins. Eat it. You look pale." "Don't worry, it's not from the garbage. I bought it at the store with the money I got from returning bottles." Frances was moved to tears by this unexpected act of kindness from a stranger. She thanked Tom and invited him in for tea to warm up. He declined, saying he had important things to do and had to visit all the dumps before it got dark. He added, "The wolf feeds by its feet. I'll come back. You eat. It's from the heart." Frances spread the contents of the bag on the table and cried tears of joy. There were apples, oranges, sausage, bread, milk, cheese, and even 2 crispy hot buns from the bakery. It had been a long time since she had enjoyed such treats. She savoured the food with great pleasure and silently wished Tom good health and blessings. He had sacrificed for her, a stranger in need. From that day on, Frances and Tom became friends. The homeless man helped her wash the floors and carried water for her so that she wouldn't have to work so hard. He would come to her for tea and warmth. Frances let him take a shower at her apartment, and they talked a lot about life. Frances talked more, while Tom was always a little wordy and silent. She often complained about where to buy a used crib and stroller. But Tom grumbled, "You do not hurry. You shouldn't buy anything before childbirth. I heard it's a bad omen. Here you will give birth, then buy." Frances laughed and said, "With 2 screaming babies, how will I buy it? Oh, Tom, I'm so scared. To be honest, 2 at once. Will I manage? How will I survive with them? My head is spinning." Tom smiled and tried to encourage her, saying, "Don't worry, sister. We'll get through this. I'll help you in any way I can. You are good that you decided to give birth. Children are happiness. They are from God. And you have 2 at once. So wait. Soon you'll be twice as happy." Frances laughed and replied, "Oh, Tom, don't be ridiculous. I think happiness and I live on different sides of the world." Before the birth, which was less than a month away, Frances persisted in cleaning, although the elderly concierge, Mrs. Oliver, grumbled, "Stop carrying buckets, girl, or you'll give birth here on the stairs, and we'll have a scandal. I've arranged for you to work illegally out of the goodness of my heart." But Frances only smiled and tried to cheer up. "I really appreciate you helping me, but don't worry, I won't give birth here. I still have a month to go, and I really need the money." That day there was a serious snowstorm, and for some reason Tom didn't come, even though they had agreed. Frances had almost finished cleaning everything, but suddenly she felt sick, and a hellish, unbearable pain pierced her whole body. Blood rushed down her legs. The poor woman barely made it to the apartment and called an ambulance. Frances's condition worsened, and she was taken away on a stretcher in a semi-fainting state. Tom was late for a whole hour, and approaching Frances's apartment building, he blamed himself. "I'm not a man of my word. I promised to help Frances. She'll think I'm a blabbermouth." He knocked and rang the doorbell, but no one opened the door. Dreadful thoughts crept into his head. The man went down and asked the concierge, "Mrs. Oliver, do you know where Frances from the 44th is? Did something happen?" The elderly woman got angry and replied, "What is it to you? Who let you in the first place?" "Yes, something's happened. Whoa, that's what. That little fool came to clean again. I tried to chase her away as I felt the trouble, but she wouldn't let me. So she got sick, she started bleeding. The ambulance crew barely made it through such a snowstorm. They took her to the maternity hospital. Oh, what will happen? I'm so scared." Tom, not remembering himself, rushed to the maternity hospital, despite the heavy snowstorm and frost. He pounded the thresholds and asked for anything about Frances. Tired of chasing him away, the nurse finally asked with ill-concealed arrogance and contempt, "Who are you? The baby's father? Wow, some women are ready to give birth to anything, even tramps. Are there no more normal men? But okay, I'll tell you, she's undergoing surgery. It's a complicated case. Wait here." Tom was almost crying. "I beg you, tell me later how she is. How are the babies? I'll wait in the corridor as long as necessary. Yes, I'm the father and these are my children. Do you understand?" Tom lied brazenly, but he realized that otherwise he'd be chased away. Another hour passed, but it seemed like an eternity to Tom. It was as if time had stopped. He had been thinking about many things. In front of his eyes stood this beautiful, laughing and at the same time sad, desperate woman. He himself did not understand why she so caught him, why he just physically could not live without Francis, and he didn't care that she was giving birth to another man's children, and it didn't matter how many there were, 1, 2, or 10. He'll take them all as his own. As long as she was always near him, there was some inner bond between them, a special warmth. At last, a tired, grey-haired doctor came out to him and said, "You are the father of Francis' babies. Congratulations, you have twins, a boy and a girl. They are weak, of course, but nothing to worry about. I'll write you a list of things to buy for premature babies. Bring it tomorrow. And now please go home, you can't see her now." Tom was over the moon. "Thank you, I'll buy everything. I'll be there tomorrow morning." The doctor looked at him critically. "By the way, you should at least clean yourself up. It's a maternity hospital after all." But Tom didn't hear him any more. Only one thought was beating in his brain. His beloved Francis is alive, and the babies are well too. And that means everything will be all right. The next day, Francis was transferred to the general double ward, and the babies were brought in for feeding. They were tiny and funny, like 2 shriveled gnomes. When Francis saw her babies, she sobbed with happiness. She was a mum now, and no longer alone. She had 2 little bundles of joy. Suddenly, her ward neighbour, who was standing near the window, said excitedly, "Look, another happy daddy. He's writing something in the snow. What a strange, shaggy man. Is he a homeless person?" Upon hearing this, Francis opened her eyes and struggled to rise. She waddled to the window, even though it was difficult. What she saw shocked her. There stood a joyful Tom, and on the snow in huge letters it was written, "Francis, I love you." Overwhelmed, Francis burst into tears. She waved to Tom like a madwoman and blew him air kisses. The neighbour looked at her perplexed and said, "Is he your husband? He looks like a drunken vagrant. That's hilarious." Francis brushed off her comments, saying, "You don't understand anything. This is the best man in the world. Do you understand? He may be a hobo, but he didn't abandon me. He was there for me in the toughest moment, when I didn't want to live. He starved himself to buy me groceries and cleaned the floors instead of me, so I wouldn't have to work too hard. He is a real man." Francis didn't care what others thought. This was her life and nobody else's. She had a roof over her head, even if it wasn't her own. She had feelings, support, and together they would overcome anything. A nurse entered and shocked Francis once again, saying, "Your children's father brought all the necessary things for newborns, so don't worry." Francis was shocked. Where did Tom get the money? An hour later there was a timid knock on the ward door, and a handsome, red-haired man in a police suit entered. He smiled, held a bouquet in his hands, and walked straight to Francis. She blinked her eyes and looked at him dumbfounded. "Tom?" The same warm blue eyes and smile, but where were the beard and braids? What kind of masquerade was this? Meanwhile, Tom sat down on a chair and said, "Francis, I congratulate you on the birth of the babies. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you were sick. I rushed as fast as I could, but there was a snowstorm and I was an hour late. I thought I'd go crazy when I heard you were bleeding and taken away in an ambulance. Now, I'll tell you the truth. I'm not really a bum or a vagrant. I'm an undercover police officer. All this time I've been investigating a drug den and a distribution point in your neighbourhood. When I first saw you crying and so defenceless on that bench, something in me changed. It wasn't just pity, but something bigger and lighter filled my soul. I can't explain it. I can't be without you, Francis. Marry me. The children will be ours, and I'll give them my last name. I want to spend my whole life with you, and I don't need anyone else. I have my own 2-bedroom place, and I'll take you and the kids there if you agree. I'm not a millionaire, I'm not rich, and my job is dangerous, but I'll always be there for you. The other woman in the ward wept, and then she went out into the corridor, realizing that Francis and Tom needed a moment alone. Francis cried tears of happiness and whispered, "Tommy, my darling, thank you for everything. I agree. I believe in you, and you supported me in my darkest hour. But I'm scared. What if you quickly get tired of everything? Taking care of 2 babies is very hard. There will be sleepless nights and exhaustion. Will you be able to love them as your own? Just answer honestly. And how will your parents react to all this? They'll probably be against it." "I will try very hard," Tom said firmly. "You just trust me. I won't betray you, hurt you, or disappear. Now we are together, hand in hand for life. I love you, Francis. I've always lived my own life. My relationship with my parents is not excellent. My father is from law enforcement, and my mother has suffered because of it. She categorically did not want me to become a police officer, but I decided, and I don't regret it. If they love me, they'll accept my choice." They hugged each other tightly and sat like that until the children were brought in for feeding. The boy was stronger and ate by himself, while the girl had to be fed from a special bottle to make it easier for her. Tom decided to do it himself. He carefully took the baby, smiled at her, and began to slowly feed her. He didn't rush, gave her a breath and said, "Eat, eat, my little Thumbelina. Eat, sweetie. Grow big and make your mummy and daddy happy. That's a good girl. There's just a little bit left, so do your best." Surprisingly, the girl heard him, sighed and finished the rest of the mixture. Frances was filled with admiration. She had never dared to dream of such happiness, and had thought that she would remain a lonely poor woman with 2 children. Upon discharge, Tom arrived in a company car with a huge bouquet of roses and balloons. This day would forever be remembered by Frances as the happiest. Bright sunshine dazzled her eyes, snowflakes were swirling. They were congratulated by the medical staff. Tom got Frances and the babies in the car and happily said, "Let's go to my house, I have everything ready there." Frances timidly entered Tom's apartment and gasped. He had thought of everything. The nursery had everything they needed, including cribs, a changing table with a dresser stocked with neatly stacked diapers and onesies, and a twin stroller. "Here, I bought what I could," Tom said with embarrassment. "If something is missing, just tell me. Don't be shy. This is our home now. Let's celebrate." The man deftly undressed both of the babies. Frances fed them, and they fell asleep sweetly, warm in the warmth. Frances and Tom went into the kitchen. The man began to fuss, but Frances pulled him back, saying, "No, let me set the table myself. You wait for the ready." Frances put the groceries on the table and quickly prepared lunch. They sat down to eat, feeling incredibly nice and comfortable. It felt like she and Tom had been together all their lives. After eating, Frances hugged Tom and kissed him, whispering, "Thank you. You are the best. I love you too. I'll be waiting for you when you're off duty. Every day I'll cook the meal for you and bake pies. I'll pray for you. Tom, how happy I am that I met you back then. I really didn't want to live." Tom was in awe. These were the words he had been waiting to hear from Frances. He had long dreamed of having a large and loving family, and now his dream had come true. Soon, the couple quietly married. Tom legally adopted the children, and they began to live a normal family life. At first, not everything was smooth. Frances was extremely tired, physically exhausted from trying to do everything. She wanted to have enough time for the children, household chores, and to show affection to her husband. But with twins it was very difficult. Sometimes Frances would forget to eat, as she was constantly busy. Tom helped her as much as he could on weekends, but on weekdays he was on duty and would come home late in the evening. He would invariably find his wife dishevelled, with huge circles under her eyes, completely drained. Soon the man realised that this was unsustainable and that Frances needed to get some rest. After all, taking care of 2 children was not easy, especially when they were restless, had tummy aches and slept poorly, constantly demanding attention. Tom's parents were not old, well-to-do retired people. They could have helped with the children, but initially they strongly opposed their son's marriage to a cleaning lady with 2 babies in her arms. This led to arguments and a complete breakdown in communication. Tom's mother, Mrs. Berger, was particularly angry. "Our son has finally gone mad. Why does he need this girl who is a tramp? She has 2 babies, and our fool picked her up. It's incomprehensible. All the neighbours are laughing. Our boy is so smart, successful in his career. His bosses appreciate him. He had Holly. She was a perfect match for him. Her father is Tom's boss, so Tom had great prospects. No, I'll never accept Frances, and I won't even go to meet that ragamuffin." Tom's father had a different opinion, saying, "Honey, calm down. Don't boil over. Don't you think Tom loves that woman? Again, we don't know her at all. Maybe we should at least try to strengthen our relationship. I also once took you away from my best friend, and probably from the outside it was ugly and dishonest. But we loved each other and could not resist this feeling." Mr. Berger pondered for a long time, and one day he decided to secretly visit Frances and understand better his son's choice. Frances had just finished cooking, and it was time to go for a walk with the babies. Glenn was capricious and crying, and Rachel was all dirty from eating mashed potatoes. The woman wiped off her daughter when the doorbell rang. She went to open the door in surprise. Tom was on his shift. Who could it be? When a thin, pretty woman with a long, beautiful ponytail, wearing an apron and holding a crying baby in her arms, opened the door, Mr. Berger was taken aback. His wife made him so nervous that he pictured an impudent, nasty woman who had preyed on their son. The man coughed and introduced himself, saying, "Good afternoon. You're Frances, aren't you? I'm Tom's father, Mr. Berger. I thought I'd come to visit, so to speak, to get acquainted." Frances was delighted and led the guest into the kitchen, set the table, and chattered non-stop. "I'm overjoyed, Mr. Berger. It's a pleasure to meet you. I've just got dinner ready. You eat up. Everything's hot. I was just about to dress the kids and take some food to Tom before it gets cold, and at least to take a look at him. I know him. He'll eat fast food again and his stomach will be ruined. Kids and I miss him so much, but what can we do? This is his job and I understand everything." Mr. Berger enjoyed the delicious meal and wondered how this fragile woman had enough strength for everything. The house was cleaned, dinner was cooked, and she had 2 kids to take care of. She looked so pale, and it was obvious that she didn't sleep much. After thinking a little, Mr. Berger suggested, "Let me hold my grandson while you take care of your daughter. It's no problem for me. What's his name? And by the way, we can go for a walk together, and I'll check on my son, because we broke up foolishly and I'm ashamed." Frances smiled and placed Glenn in Mr. Berger's arms. He clapped his hands, reached for the elderly man, and babbled something in his own language. Mr. Berger began to entertain the boy, rocking him on his knee, which made him laugh gleefully. The man felt so warm and good inside. Looking at them, Frances said, "This is Glenn. He has a mole behind his ear. He and Rachel looked so much alike. Sometimes I mistake them myself. You know, Mr. Berger, I love Tom very much. I understand what you think of me, putting my children on Tom's neck. But it's not true. He proposed to me himself. He fell in love with me, and we're excellent together, although it's still difficult because the children are little. But soon they'll grow up and it will be easier. They'll go to daycare, and Tom promised to arrange me to work in the archive with him. I would never have forced Tom, but I see that he is happy to take care of the children. His eyes are full of love. It's a pity that Mrs. Berger doesn't call him at all. Is it because of me? Tom is worried about it. After all, she's still his mum. By the way, Rachel and I are ready. Now hold her and I'll get Glenn ready. Although my head is spinning, but children are happiness. When you hug them, press them against you, all the fatigue goes away. Since that day, Mr. Berger began secretly visiting his son's family, taking kids for walks so that Francis could rest. Eventually, Mrs. Berger was convinced to join them too, and the family was finally at peace. But suddenly, the unexpected happened. One day, Frances received a call from Mario. Hearing his harsh voice made her feel sick. "Hello, Frances. Didn't expect to hear from me. And I see you're not wasting time. Well done. You found a fool and gotten married. But you forgot one thing, my sweetie. The children are mine, and I intend to take them. I'm the birth father, and I have every right to do so, and I can easily prove it." Frances, no longer timid and naive, flared up. "What do you mean? You remembered the children after a year after they were born. They have a real father now. He is a police officer, by the way. And I don't want to see or hear from you. Don't ever call me again. You won't see the children." Mario didn't expect such a welcome and started shouting. "Have you got the nerve, chicken? I have so much money that I don't care about your officer. I'll crush him. And I'll take the kids anyway. I'll make the genetic test and take them abroad if they are mine. Is that clear? It's better to negotiate amicably. Otherwise I'll make your life with your Romeo difficult." Frances hung up the phone and burst into tears. Concerned, Tom asked, "Darling, what happened? Who called you? Your ex-boyfriend? What does he want? I'm not giving you to anyone, and I'm already terribly jealous." "He doesn't need me," Frances answered through sobs. "He said that he would take my children away, certainly. He mentioned genetic testing, and if I don't give them to him, he'll make our lives miserable. Tom, I'm so scared. You have no idea the kind of connections he has. He can get away with anything. What if he really takes the children away from us?" Tom hugged his wife and reassured her. "Frances, look at me. Don't cry. Calm down. I promise you, nothing will happen to the children. Let's go to my parents now. My father has worked in law enforcement all his life. He'll tell us what to do. I'm with you. We're together. I won't let some autocrat destroy my family." At the family council, it was decided to send Frances and the children to the Aunt Lynn, who lived in the village. Mr. Berger reasoned, "No one knows about her. They won't look for Frances there. It's better to be safe. Meanwhile, Tom digs into Mario's background and find any dirt on him. People like him must have dark secrets. This is our only chance to expose him." Frances quickly gathered the children, and Tom took her to the remote village, to Aunt Lynn's house. It was wonderfully quiet and nice there, with a forest, a river, and an old cosy house. Aunt Lynn took one look at Frances and the children and immediately said, "My dear, you should get some rest and relax. I'll take care of everything. Come in. Make yourself comfortable." 2 weeks had passed. Aunt Lynn had worked miracles, and Glenn and Rachel started sleeping and eating much better, and they were less irritable. Despite this, Frances was exhausted and worried about how Tom was doing, because there was no communication at all. Finally, Frances's wait was over. Tom had come for her. From the doorstep he said, "Frances, I found out everything about Mario. You won't believe it. First, he went abroad and contracted a venereal disease, which made him completely infertile. That's why he decided to think about having children when he returned home. But that's not the point. I found camera tapes, checked his car, and guess what? It was Mario who hit your mum, and caused her death. He even got out of the car, realised what he had done and ran away. What a scoundrel! I got everybody fired up. How is it possible to close such an easy case? The evidence is right there. He was so sure of his impunity and ability to buy everyone off that he didn't even bother to check if there was a camera. Now Mario won't be able to escape. He's already in custody, and he will go to jail. No doubt about it. Francis sobbed and whispered, "God, this is unbelievable. I can't believe it. The biological father of my children killed their grandmother. Tommy, please, I need to talk to him. I need to look him in the eye. Is there nothing sacred to him anymore?" "Thank you, my love, and thanks to your dad too." Tom managed to arrange a meeting, and Mario was brought to the interrogation room. When Frances saw this glossy, impudent man with a hard, prickly look, she didn't even flinch inside. Not only that, she looked at him and couldn't believe why she had fallen in love with him in the first place. Why? Mario smirked crookedly and said, "Why did you come? Do you think you can outsmart me? My lawyers will tear this whole accusation apart, and I will still take the children away." Frances asked quietly, "Mario, tell me, did you know that you hit my mother in that street? I've told you about it many times and described where and when it happened. You couldn't have known. How could you? Why didn't you call an ambulance? Why didn't you take her to the hospital? You just ran away. That's inhumane." Mario grinned and whispered quietly, "Listen to me. I was drunk. Your mother died instantly. I checked her pulse. There was no pulse. Why would I call an ambulance? What would you have done if you were in my position? Voluntarily confess to murder and go to jail? Of course, I knew what you were talking about when you told me about your mother's death. What could I have done? Confess? Would that have made you feel better? I made a terrible mistake. Who hasn't made a mistake?" Frances was struck by the level of his cynicism and sacrilege. She asked again, "And the children, what do you need them for? Do you have any idea what it's like to have 2 one-year-old children? They're not dolls. They need round-the-clock care. You have to love them, truly love them, give them your best. Are you capable of that? You threw me out of your life. You ran away abroad. You wanted me to get rid of them. And now all of a sudden you want to play the role of a father? Is there any humanity left in you?" Glenn and Rachel adore Tom. They call him Daddy. They wait for him when he's away. They fall asleep in his arms. He wakes up at night for them. We raise them together, take care of them, worry about them. We are a family, a real family. So why do you want to ruin our lives? Please come to your senses and leave us alone. Do something good for once. However, I will never forgive you for what you did to my mother." Mario returned to the cell and began pounding furiously at the wall with his fist in anger. He roared in a frenzy, realizing that Frances was right about everything. In fact, he didn't love children, didn't know them, and didn't think about them at all, for now. The rich man changed girls like gloves, feeling like the king of life. It was only when one of them gave him a bouquet of diseases, which he barely cured, that he suddenly realized he was living for nothing. Who were all these girls to him? His millions couldn't warm the soul, because it turns out you can't buy happiness. So he decided to take Frances's children away, knowing that he would not have the chance to be a father any more. Mario was given 5 years for the murder of Frances's mother, and now he was serving time in the zone, albeit in a comfortable cell. He rethought a lot and even wrote a letter to Frances apologizing for everything and promising never to harm her or her children again. He also asked her to send him photos of the kids from time to time. Frances often visited her mother at the cemetery, and one day Frances said, "You know, Mum, I thought that if I found out the name of the killer and he was punished, it would be revenge and my soul would calm down. Was I relieved when Mario went to prison? Not a bit. You can't be revived. You can't come back. But you know, Mum, I'm happy now. Tom is the best husband and a caring father. We're even thinking of having another child. Rest in peace, Mummy. I love you and will always remember you." You've always been like this, ever since you were a kid. All the kids are sitting normally, they're playing, but you've always wanted more than other kids, as if you were better than the others. Erin remained silent. She knew that when her stepmother was in such a mood, it was better not to argue with her. Actually, Melissa was not a bad woman. When she started living with Erin's father and moved into their house with her son Dave, who was only a year older than Erin, the children always received the same care and punishment from her. Everything was fair. Stepmother was easily provoked, but also easily calmed down, unlike her father, who required much more effort to anger. But if Sean lost his temper, everyone suffered. Therefore, it was easier for Erin and Dave to confess their childish pranks to Melissa. She, of course, would first clutch her heart and start lamenting. However, after the light punishment, the misbehaviour of the children was never mentioned again. But when the stepmother learned that her stepdaughter planned to go to the city after school to study, she couldn't calm down for a long time. The father, of course, was also not delighted, but as usual, he did not express any of his feelings. Melissa initially hoped that Erin would come to her senses and stay in their native village, just like Dave did. But unlike her stepbrother, the girl always knew that her place was not there. She dreamed of going to the city and becoming a clothing designer or stylist. Erin was not actually sure what her future profession would be called, but she was sure that she would make people beautiful, just like her mother. She didn't remember her mother very well. She left when Erin was 7 years old. But whenever the girl thought of her, the image of a light fairy from a fairy tale would come to mind. Big blue eyes, blonde hair similar to Erin's own, a slim figure, fair skin, a gentle voice and a dreamy gaze. In their village, Erin's mother seemed like a creature from another world. She didn't know how to tend the garden or feed the chickens. Daddy did all the housework, and sometimes his mother would help. The woman did not like her daughter-in-law, who was completely unadapted to village life, and she often used swear words to remember the day when her son brought her from the city. Erin's mother loved doing only 2 things, singing and sewing clothes, and Erin still kept the dresses made by her mum's hands from her childhood. Unfortunately, when Erin was 7, her mum disappeared. The girl couldn't understand what had happened for a long time. She kept asking her father where her mum was and when she would come back. He remained silent. Finally, her grandmother provided an answer. "She left you and ran back to the city. She couldn't live here. I told Sean right away that she was no match for him. She didn't belong here. I hope we'll raise you to be a good person, not like your good-for-nothing mother." And soon after she found her son a second wife. A simple, frugal woman experienced in family matters. "Here is Melissa," she said to Sean. "She's a good woman. She has already given birth to a son, buried her husband, and yet she manages the household just fine." Sean obeyed and they got married. And although, in some sense, Melissa replaced Erin's mother, the girl never forgot about her real mother. Deep down, she was sure that as soon as she arrived in the city, she would find her. Surely, her mother had already become a famous fashion designer, and Erin would follow in her footsteps. They would meet at a fashion show, and her mother would recognize her and be proud. And so, The day of departure finally arrived. Even the loud displeasure of her stepmother, who accompanied her to the bus, could not spoil Erin's mood. Melissa placed her stepdaughter in the best seat she could find and made sure the old suitcase was neatly placed in the luggage compartment. "All right," she said sternly, glancing gloomily out of the window. "Write to us once you're settled in." Suddenly Melissa bent over abruptly and awkwardly kissed her stepdaughter on the cheek. Then, as if startled by her own emotions, she quickly recoiled and got off the bus. Erin saw her rapidly retreating figure through the window. "She's good," the girl suddenly thought, although not my own mother. The next morning Erin diligently studied the list of those admitted to the college, only to find that her name was not on it. "Didn't get in?" A tall, skinny, red-headed girl with funny glasses asked sympathetically. "It's just a mistake," said Erin confidently. "I'm sure they should have accepted me." The red-haired girl shrugged. "Since you're confident, go to the dean's office and find out for sure. If you like, I'll walk you there." Erin nodded. As they walked down the narrow, dark corridor, she asked the new acquaintance her name and if she had been accepted into this college. "My name is Jill. No, I didn't get in because I wasn't going to. I was just walking by. It's hot outside, so I thought I'd come inside and sit in the cooler room for a while. It's interesting to look at the applicants, how they are happy and sad." Erin was surprised at this way of spending time, but decided not to show it, especially as they were approaching the dean's office. "Well, good luck," Jill said. "I'll wait for you here." Erin knocked cautiously. From the other side of the door came a muffled voice. "Come in." In the office sat a short, dense, grey-haired man with glasses. "Hello, I'm here about enrolment. It seems they forgot to put me on the list of those who passed the exams." The dean looked up and looked surprised at the brave girl, but nevertheless asked for her last name and first name. "Just a moment." He pulled up a thick pile of sheets, flipped through it with quick, honed movements, found the one he wanted and read it carefully from beginning to end. He frowned and looked at Erin. "There is no mistake. You did not enter." Seeing the girl's face, he added softly, "Try again next year. Only prepare properly." Erin nodded dumbfoundedly and left the office. Jill, as promised, was waiting for her in the corridor, looking at the stand with the history of the department with interest. "Well," she asked, "did you figure it out?" Erin nodded, feeling tears coming to her eyes. "I didn't get in." "Oh, I'm sorry, don't worry. You'll definitely get in next year. My older sister got into university only the second time, but nevertheless, she's graduated with honours." Erin smiled, strained. "Thank you. All right, let's get out of here." Outside, as luck would have it, the weather was particularly nice. The sun was shining dazzlingly, birds were singing, and the flowers in the flower bed outside the college filled the air with a lusciously sweet scent, as if no one in the world cared that Erin's dreams had just been shattered. "Where are you going now?" Jill asked. "Maybe we should go the same way. In fact, I'd like to have a coffee right now, and a little snack. Would you like to join me?" "I'm going to the train station," Erin said, and lightly shook the hand in which she held the suitcase. "I came here from the village." "And there are no relatives here?" Jill asked in surprise. "My mum lives here," Erin wanted to say, but held back and only shook her head negatively. Jill looked at her thoughtfully, as if pondering something. Finally she asked, "Do you want to go back home to the village?" "No," replied Erin. "Then let's go and drink coffee and we'll figure it out." They went to a small red car. Jill threw Erin's suitcase in the trunk and they went to drink coffee. 15 minutes later the girls were sitting on the terrace of a cosy cafe. "Delicious coffee," said Erin. "Thank you for treating me." "You're welcome. What was your plan, in case you didn't get in?" Erin sighed and lowered her eyes. "I didn't have a plan. I was sure I'd get in." "Gee, life is so unpredictable. You have to be ready for anything." Jill shook her head. Meanwhile, Erin continued, I don't want to go back to the village, Jill, but there are no other options. I thought I'd study, live in a dormitory, get a job. Okay, Erin, here's my plan. You can live with me, find a job, and prepare for enrolment the next year. Erin looked at her incredulously. Why do you need it? Jill shrugged her skinny, pale shoulders covered with freckles and replied, Why not? Jill lived in a large 3-bedroom apartment on the first floor of an old 9-story building. But as soon as Erin entered, she immediately felt an atmosphere of coziness. In the first room there was a piano with stacks of yellowed sheets with notes on it. Next to it was an old chair upholstered in cracked brown leather. Opposite the instrument near the wall was a couch, and above it hung bookshelves with a few photo frames interspersed with dusty old books. Your parents? Erin asked. Jill nodded and replied, My dad's an opera singer, and my mum's a diplomat, like my older sister. Wow, said Erin, dumbfounded. Jill only shrugged. The second bedroom was Jill's bedroom. There was a large bed, a tall, ceiling-high wooden closet, and shelves with many dolls. Mum brought them back from every trip, Jill explained. Erin remembered that she had only 2 dolls as a child. The first was a bald baby doll, which she believed her mum had bought for her back in the day. The second was a Barbie doll her stepmother had given her as a Christmas gift. Jill said thoughtfully, You will live in the 3rd bedroom. It's kind of my guest room. The 3rd bedroom had a fold-out couch, a wide, squat, dark dresser, and a desk and chair. Okay, get your stuff sorted out for now. Take the towel and linens in the dresser. Don't be shy. The bathroom and toilet are just to the right of the front door. Get some rest. Maybe you need to sleep or just lie down. I'll do my own thing, and then we'll go to my friend's summer house tonight. Erin had never been to a country house, especially one so big and beautiful. The huge 2-story wooden house was full of cheerful young guys and girls, most of whom seemed too drunk and loud. Jill felt like she belonged in this company. She introduced Erin to everyone, presenting her as her new friend and future clothing designer. Erin smiled shyly and wished she could disappear. Distractedly taking the plastic cup of wine in her hand, she stepped aside, then saw the back door to the yard open and slipped in. It was much quieter outside. There was a couple hugging on the bench near the porch, but further back in the garden, where a white gazebo stood between the trees, there seemed to be no one. That's where Erin went. She sat down on a bench, put a glass of wine on the railing and closed her eyes. Suddenly a pleasant male voice came from above her. Why is such a fairy sad alone? Erin opened her eyes and saw a tall, handsome guy. My name's Joshua, so why are you bored? He asked. And I'm Erin. I don't know anyone there. Also, everyone's been drinking a lot. Joshua raised his eyebrows and sat down next to her. It's beautiful here, isn't it? He said. Yes, it's beautiful, Erin agreed, but under the gaze of his dark eyes she felt both hot and cold. She wanted him to leave, or, on the contrary, to sit here with her until morning. A month passed. Jill, get up, you're going to be late for work. Erin pounded insistently on her friend's door. No one answered, so Erin went in. Jill was sleeping sweetly, with her head covered with a blanket, from under which only her left heel was sticking out. Erin tickled her. Jill shrieked and threw off the blanket, sitting on the bed and wiping her eyes unhappily. How did you get so much strength, Erin? I heard that you came back just in the morning. Did you go out with Joshua again? Haven't you had enough of him for a month yet? Erin smiled embarrassedly. And you were reading again till morning, weren't you? Jill stretched and said, Well, yes. Ben gave me his new novel to review. It's still a draft, but it's already entertaining. Okay, let's have a quick breakfast. I'll drop you off at work on time. Then you wash up, Erin said. And I've made breakfast. I'll set the table. In the kitchen, Jill asked, Do you regret working as a cleaner? Just tell me and I'll find something more suitable for you at my work." Erin shook her head. "No, I like everything, and I can learn a lot there, even just by listening to my boss yell at her assistants." "Well, if that's the case, I won't interfere with your learning process," joked Jill. A month later, when Erin woke up in her new friend's apartment after a weekend spent at the summer house, it became clear to her that she needed to look for a job immediately. Although Jill said that she didn't have to pay for housing, she still needed money for groceries, transportation and everything else. But who would hire a young girl without an education? For some reason, Erin remembered the words of her stepmother at that moment. Melissa had said those words to her son Dave, who had graduated from school and didn't know where to find work. "There's plenty of work everywhere. If you want to find a job, go outside and look around." That's precisely what Erin did. She walked around for 2 hours exploring the city, admiring the tall buildings and the big green parks. When she was already tired and headed home, her eyes fell on a small ad on the door. "Full-time cleaner wanted in Cassandra's fashion house." The sign for Cassandra's fashion house was beautiful. It had huge, sleek, white glossy letters on a black background. A high, white marble porch led through transparent doors into a hall with a ceiling adorned with paintings of flowers, clouds, angels, and warriors on horseback. Erin wanted to examine everything in detail, but a high-pitched female voice interrupted her thoughts. "Young lady, who are you?" A slender woman in an airy white blouse and a very tight black skirt approached her. "Hello," said Erin. "I'm here about the ad. Do you need a cleaner?" "Yes, but we have very strict requirements. Not just anyone can do it." Then the woman gestured for Erin to follow. Together they walked through the snow-white hall, which was almost empty except for mannequins and clothes racks along the walls. At the back of the hall there was a massive wooden table piled with colourful fabric pieces, buttons of different shapes and sizes, brooches, belts and more. There was a large black leather armchair behind the desk where a woman in her 60s was sitting and smoking. She had very short grey hair and attentive black eyes that scanned Erin from head to toe. "I'm ready to start working today," Erin said. Cassandra grinned. "Actually, we have one requirement. Clean well and do as you're told. The main thing is to be indispensable. A quiet, hard-working mouse." "I can do that," Erin said confidently. Cassandra looked at her assistant. "Latrice, did you hear her? Hire the girl." Then she took a drag on her cigarette and tucked some drawings and photos into a black leather folder. "Let's go," Latrice whispered to Erin, barely moving her lips. And so the girl, who had arrived from the village just a few days ago, became a cleaner in one of the city's best fashion houses. Only after seeing everything from the inside did Erin realise how different her idea of style, fashion and clothing design was from the reality. She understood why she hadn't been accepted into a fashion school. Erin strictly complied with Cassandra's requirements to be as quiet as water and as low as grass. She silently wiped mirrors, dusted and collected fabric scraps, while catching every word her boss said. She tried to memorize every image created in the studio, and although she worked from morning until evening every day, she never felt tired, especially since Joshua would take her out in the evenings. Erin had never met someone like Joshua before. He was spectacular, energetic, easygoing and always in a good mood. All the men in her village, regardless of their age, always seemed preoccupied with something, usually thinking about how to make money and how to spend it on alcohol. But Joshua took her to a new place every day. In the span of a month, she looked at the city at night from an observation deck, rode horses, touched dolphins at the dolphinarium, and strolled through the botanical garden. Within a week, Erin realised that she had fallen in love. True, Joshua hadn't said anything about his love to her, but she could see that he felt the same way. It felt like all those years of living in the village with a strict stepmother and a cold father, impoverished and without love or attention, were finally over. Now everything would be fine in her life. In addition to work and meetings with Joshua, Erin diligently prepared for enrollment. She started studying all the textbooks she could get her hands on. One day, she cautiously approached Latrice and timidly expressed her desire to learn more about fashion and style. "Follow me," the assistant said nonchalantly, leading Erin into a dusty back room. There were piles of folders, magazines and drawings. "These are the archives of our fashion house," she explained. "Study them, memorize them. Some even have Cassandra's notes on them. Erin, you're a good girl and good at your job. We haven't had a cleaner last longer than 3 weeks. I can see that you catch every word Cassandra says. And that's right." Erin decided to come clean. "I want to be a fashion designer too, and I plan to go to college next year to try it out." Latrice said thoughtfully. "What's there to say? The road will be travelled by the one who walks it. So don't waste any time. Learn everything from the very basics, perfect your drawing, and move on to our archives." Erin had never felt so happy. The next day was her day off. Joshua had promised to pick her up in the evening and surprise her. In the morning she did not want to get up at all. After all, the past month was very busy, and she didn't want to miss the opportunity to lie in bed as much as she wanted. She had never had that luxury at home. Her stepmother always woke her and Dave up bright and early and assigned them chores. Erin still remembers how she spent the whole morning making dumplings on the eve of her birthday. The thought of dumplings made her nauseous. The girl opened her eyes and finally shook off sleep. Then Erin jumped up and ran to the bathroom. "Jill," she said indignantly to her friend, entering the kitchen, "I can smell from the bedroom that these eggs are spoiled. Why are you frying them?" Jill looked up from her book in surprise and walked over to the skillet, sniffing it with her nose. "I bought them yesterday. What makes you think they're not fresh?" The smell of them made me sick. Erin opened the window wide and the fresh air made her feel better. Jill frowned. "Interesting. Take a test, please. Take it from my shelf in the bathroom." Erin looked at her friend in surprise, but obediently followed her suggestion. A little later, when Jill had already put breakfast on plates, Erin returned to the kitchen. "2 stripes," she said, stunned. "Wow. I don't know what to say. It depends on whether you are expecting it or not." "I wasn't expecting it," Erin admitted honestly, "but I'm pleased, and I think Joshua will be happy too." "Great then." Jill cheered for her friend. "And now, pregnant woman, let's have breakfast." All day long, Erin walked in high spirits. The news was unexpected for her, but it turned out that this is how it should be. "I have to tell my father and stepmother," Erin thought, and at that moment she remembered that she still hadn't told them that she hadn't gone to college. She felt ashamed. How could she have forgotten to call them? Her father must think that she had become conceited or had run away like her mother. She also remembered how Melissa had kissed her goodbye and told her to call more often. Okay, at least now she had a story to tell. She had a job, she was actively preparing for enrollment, she had a fiancé, and she would have a child. In the evening, Joshua was late. He was supposed to pick her up half an hour ago. "Call him," Jill said. "What if his car broke down or something?" "I don't have his phone number," Erin said. "What do you mean?" Jill didn't believe her, thinking she had misheard. "I don't know. Somehow I didn't ask his number. We saw each other almost every day and agreed in advance when we would meet next time. And during the day he is at work, so there isn't enough time to talk." Jill frowned. "And where does he work? Do you know?" "No." Okay, what's his last name?" I haven't asked, Erin replied, almost crying. Okay, Jill came to her friend and hugged her. Let's wait until tomorrow. If he doesn't show up, let's go to his house. Erin walked around the room. Jill, what if something bad happened to him? Erin, nothing could have happened to him, so we wait until tomorrow, and then we go to his place. That night, Erin hardly slept at all. Images of Joshua getting into an accident, being attacked by hooligans, or the elevator rope breaking flashed in her mind. She slept for a couple of hours and woke up early, feeling completely exhausted. Jill? She knocked cautiously on Jill's door. Erin, it's Sunday, 8 o'clock in the morning. Let's get at least another hour of sleep. Let's go, please. I can't take it anymore. Okay. Jill sleepily stretched and looked at her worried friend. I can't say no to a pregnant woman. Erin was desperately knocking on the door of Joshua's apartment, but no one opened. She hadn't taken her finger off the doorbell button for probably 5 minutes. Jill stood nearby, growing increasingly gloomy. I guess we should call the police, Erin said. What if he's lying there on the floor unconscious? Well, yes, Jill said in a strangely colourless tone. At that moment, the door to the apartment across the hall opened. What's with all the noise in the early morning? Asked a sleepy woman in her mid-40s wearing a robe, unhappily. I'm sorry, Erin turned to her. We're just concerned because the person who lives here won't open the door. We're worried that something bad might have happened to him. Why are you looking for him here? The neighbour asked, even more disgruntled. He moved out yesterday. He left with his bags. This wasn't his apartment? Jill clarified. No, of course not. He must have rented it for about a year. I see, Jill said. Thank you. Let's leave, Erin. She firmly took Erin's elbow and led her towards the elevator. I don't understand anything, Erin said as they headed home. How could he just leave without saying anything? Jill pressed her lips together, gripping the steering wheel even tighter. It was as if she struggled with herself for a while, but she finally said, Erin, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but I don't think there's anything wrong with Joshua. He only used you when it was convenient for him, and now he has apparently moved on to other things and other women. How could you say that about him? Jill braked sharply and parked. She turned to her friend and looked at her. Erin, wake up. Do you think it's normal to date someone for a month and not know anything about them? No last name, no place of work, no phone number. Do you think it just happened accidentally? Erin remained silent. Jill saw tears streaming down the girl's cheeks. All her anger suddenly vanished. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just don't want you to live in an illusion and make excuses for him. The tears continued to flow and her mind was blank. Strangely enough, at that moment, Erin didn't feel any pain. Instead, everything inside her seemed frozen. 2 months passed. I wish I could go with you to the ultrasound, Jill sighed, but I really need to be at work. Don't worry, I feel fine, and it's only a 4-stop bus ride from work, Erin said, struggling to button up her jacket. By the way, how did your boss react to your pregnancy? Jill asked, finishing her coffee. Erin let out a sigh. Cassandra doesn't know yet. I don't think she sees anything beyond outfits, and she certainly doesn't pay attention to some cleaning lady. Latrice, on the other hand, has her suspicions. I guess I can hide it somehow for another month or 2, and then that's it. I'm afraid they'll fire me if they find out. That's illegal, so don't worry. If they try anything, I'll report them to the Labour Inspectorate. And remember, I've told you many times, you can live with me for as long as you want, even if you're not working. You don't have to go back to that village. Have you told your parents? I've only told them that I didn't get in college and I got a job. And them? Scolded? Called you back? Oddly enough, no, Erin chuckled. Actually, my stepmother replied. I don't know what my father really thinks, but She said not to get upset and that I could definitely enroll next year. It's really strange, to be honest. Well, maybe she missed you and realised how difficult it is to manage the household without a helping hand. I'd like to meet your family, but later. Erin smiled at her friend and went to work. It was on that day that she realised that her boss had noticed the changes in her appearance, even though Erin tried to hide it. When the workday was over, Cassandra called her into her office. She's probably going to fire me, Erin thought, wiping her sweaty palms on her pants. Cassandra, as usual, was smoking and looking at the sketches spread out on the table in front of her. "Have a seat, Erin," she said, pointing to the chair beside her. Erin sat down, trying to suck in her belly as much as possible, although it was no longer possible. "Which one?" Cassandra asked, sliding 2 pictures towards her. "For the window display?" "Yes, it will be placed in the centre." Confidently, Erin pointed to the photo on the left. "Why?" Cassandra asked. "It looks more vibrant. The second image seems casual, but this one reflects the collection you've been working on." Erin hesitated for a second but continued. "And I also think it creates a kind of New Year's atmosphere. People will look at it and immediately feel that the holiday is approaching." Cassandra said thoughtfully, looking at the picture again. "Not bad. By the way, I called you here for a reason. Would you be interested in moving up to a junior assistant position?" Erin was surprised as she looked at her boss, but Cassandra appeared completely serious. "Of course," answered Erin. "Great. Don't be surprised. Latrice told me about your plans for the fashion world. I'm not blind myself. I can see that you don't miss a single word. And by the way, soon you can't wash the floors with your belly. So you know?" asked Erin in surprise. "Sweetheart," Cassandra sighed. "I'm old, sure, but I'm not blind yet." "You're not going to fire me?" Erin cautiously asked. "Did you even listen to what I've told you?" "Yes, but—" "So that's it. Return to your work now." Cassandra abruptly opened the sketch folder and focused her gaze on it. Erin already knew it was best not to approach her boss at times like this. She carefully stood up, whispered, "Thank you," and left. Later that evening, Erin stood at the bus stop and waited for the bus. She stepped from foot to foot to keep warm. There was only one elderly lady at the bus stop. Although Erin didn't like staring at strangers, this woman caught her attention. She was wearing a long, red plaid woolen coat, and in her arm sat a big black cat, who was carefully watching Erin with big green eyes. Finally the bus arrived and Erin and the old woman got on. "Payment at the entrance," the driver shouted sharply, almost causing the girl to drop her bag. Erin paid, walked through, and sat in the first seat of the empty bus. The elderly woman stopped in the aisle, made the cat comfortable, and began searching for something in a small, beaded black purse. "Hurry up, please," asked the impatient driver. "Just a moment," replied the old lady politely. "There's a coin somewhere in here." The driver let out a loud, defiant sigh. The elderly woman searched her bag even more diligently, while the cat meowed unhappily. "Take it," Erin said, holding out the money to the driver. He grumbled but said nothing. The girl returned to her seat, and the elderly woman sat down next to her. "Thank you, my dear." "You're welcome." "Are you going for an ultrasound?" the woman asked. "How did you guess?" The woman smiled, stroked the cat, and gestured towards Erin's belly with her eyes. "It's not hard. For now, almost no one notices yet, because the term is small. I have an experienced eye. I can tell you something else interesting." The black cat suddenly stood up, stretched, and climbed from the old woman's lap to Erin's lap. "That's a good sign," said its mistress. "Usually he doesn't approach strangers, but he likes you." Erin stroked the cat. Its fur was warm, almost hot. "What do you want to tell me?" The elderly woman smiled, closed her eyes, and began to sway slightly forward and backward. "You yourself were an accidental child, but brought much joy by your birth. You will find a mother twice more. First falsely, then truly. The path you have chosen is the right one. Follow it. Name your daughter Holly. Don't go back to the past. Look to the future. The elderly woman's voice, so sing-song smooth and quiet, as if led Erin into some kind of trance. She heard everything, understood everything, but it was as if time had slowed down and every word of the unexpected prediction was etched into her memory. "Girl," came the familiar rough voice of the driver. "Girl, this is your stop. You're getting off here, aren't you?" Erin looked out the window. Yes, it was the right stop. She hadn't even noticed when the bus stopped. And the most amazing thing was that the old lady with the cat in the next seat was no longer there. "The baby is developing perfectly. All indicators are normal. I don't see any pathology," said the doctor, a beautiful young woman who explained in understandable words what she was doing and the results of the examination. "You're having a girl." Erin remembered the strange woman's words. "Name your daughter Holly." Once home, Erin happily laid down on the sofa and closed her eyes. Finally she could relax after a day full of events and reflect on everything. Her feelings towards fortune-tellers, clairvoyants and other mystics was hard to define. I should remember what the old lady with the cat said. Name your daughter Holly. It's a beautiful name. Joshua would like it. Every time Erin thought of Joshua, her heart clenched with pain. She instinctively placed her hand on her belly. She would never admit it to Jill, but deep down she still held on to the hope that he would return. She had even dreamt of him a few times, and in each dream he assured her that it wasn't his fault he had to leave her, and that they would be together forever now that he was back. "You will find your mother twice more, the first time falsely, then truly." Erin recalled more of the old woman's words. Amidst everything that had happened, the search for her mother had taken a back seat. Perhaps it was now worth pursuing, starting with her father. Most likely he would know her mum's relatives, friends, her old workplace, or some addresses. Without delay, Erin went to her hometown. As she walked along the familiar street, she felt a strange sensation. It was as if she had never left, and yet had never been there before. The small old wooden houses, smoke billowing from chimneys, shaggy dogs barking at the bus, women in warm scarves and men in boots, felt both close and distant. It was as if Erin had seen it all in a past life. Upon seeing her house, she realized how much had changed in the past 6 months. She had left as a little girl, a schoolgirl of yesterday, and returned as a future mother. "Erin! Erin is here!" Her half-brother's voice rang out. Dave was chopping wood when he spotted her. He dropped the axe and ran to her. With his ruddy cheeks and hair sticking to his forehead, he embraced his half-sister tightly, lifting her up and spinning her around. "Dave, let me go!" Erin laughed. "I'm very glad to see you, too. Are our parents at home?" Dave nodded and they entered the house. Dave kept his huge arm around Erin's shoulder and didn't want to let go the entire way. Erin felt suddenly ashamed that she hadn't called him once during this time. Her half-brother had always treated her like a sibling. Inside she was greeted by her stepmother, standing by the flower-covered table, cooking as usual. Her father was not in sight, likely sitting in front of the TV. "Mum, Erin's here!" Dave shouted. Melissa turned her head and gasped. For a moment it seemed as if the stepmother was pleased with her, and even as if she wanted to embrace her stepdaughter. But after a second, as if embarrassed by her impulse, she put her hands to her sides and spoke, pretending to be angry. "Well, look who's come to us, all of a sudden. For half a year I've hardly heard a word, and now you just drop in unexpectedly, like snow on my head." The stepmother took a noisy breath as if regaining composure and continued, "Come in, take off your coat. Why are you standing there? It's as if you've never been here before. And come to the fireplace quickly, you're freezing. Your nose is white. Dave, make her some tea with ginger. Erin's father appeared in the kitchen. He wiped his eyes, confused, and didn't immediately realise what the commotion was about. When he saw his daughter, he didn't even smile. "Hi, Daddy," Erin said and hugged him. The father hummed oddly, barely hugging his daughter back. "Sit in the living room for now," Melissa commanded. "We'll be having dinner soon." Erin, her father, and her stepbrother made their way into the living room. The father turned up the volume on the TV and returned to watching his favourite programme. Dave asked, "How's work going?" "It's fine. They even promised me a promotion. I'll be a junior assistant now. And how about you?" The young man shrugged. "Fine. I'm home for now. After the new year, I'll go to the north for a 3-month shift." "Wow," Erin wondered. Her brother looked pleased. "Mum's worried," he said. "It's as if you aren't happy with this idea either. But I'm glad. I'll make money, and I can finally see the world outside our hometown." Erin suddenly realised that Dave probably never went farther than their village. She decided to tell her stepmother about her pregnancy the next day, especially since Melissa had been suspiciously eyeing her the day before. Each member of the family reacted differently to the news. Dave was happy to become an uncle. The stepmother gasped and said, "Oh my God, I knew it." The father simply got up and went outside. Dave calmed Erin with a nod and followed his stepfather. "It's nothing," Melissa said. "He'll come to his senses. Currently he's just a little shocked, of course." Erin suddenly realised that she could take advantage of the impact her news had made and talk to her stepmother. "Melissa," she began timidly, "did my father ever tell you about my mother?" Her stepmother looked at her unhappily, frowned and answered, "Yes, when we began to communicate." "Please tell me everything you know. It's not like he'll ever tell me, and I'm an adult, I have a right to know." The stepmother looked at Erin's belly and sighed. "Okay, you're going to be a mother yourself soon. It's not good for you to be carrying all that weight with your own mother for so many years." Erin felt her heart racing. Was she really about to find out what had happened to her mum? "I don't know all the details," Melissa began. "Sean told me once when he was drunk, and it was a long time ago. In general, they met when your father came to the city to take a chauffeur's course. He seemed to like your mother right away. Sean said he didn't understand why she paid attention to him. It was clear that the girl was from a rich family. It was quite a strange story. She either quarrelled with her parents, or they went somewhere, or died. Anyway, she and Sean hit it off rapidly, and by the time he passed the exam and was about to leave, she suddenly said to him, 'I want to live with you, and I want to live in the village.' They got married quickly, and almost immediately it turned out that your mum was pregnant. Well, and when she left, you probably remember." Erin nodded. She remembered it very well. "Didn't father say why she left?" Melissa shrugged. He only said that it quickly became clear to him that she didn't belong here. At first, Sean hoped his wife would adjust to village life. He even took all the housework on himself and sat with you when he could. But no, your mother was very homesick. It was as if nothing pleased her. "Not even me?" said Erin quietly. Melissa reached out her hand as if she wanted to pet Erin, but took it back halfway. "Sean said she loved you. That's why she lived with him for so many years. But she was getting worse every day. He knew that one day she would leave, and so she did." "I want to find her," Erin said. "There must still be some addresses, phone numbers, where she lived when they met. And her parents, my grandparents, didn't they ever come to visit us?" "No." Father's voice came from behind him. He entered somehow unnoticed, and the women even flinched at his voice. The father walked heavily, sat down at a vacant table and began to narrate, looking absently at his daughter. "I tried to find her. There were no cell phones back then, The only address I knew was her then apartment, which she rented with a friend. 8 years later, other people lived there, and no one had heard of your mother. Her parents, I've never seen either, as if she had a big fight with them and hasn't spoken to them for months at the time of our meeting. I don't even know if they know they have a granddaughter. I think while she lived in the village, she didn't communicate with anyone from the city. Her parents seemed to be wealthy people. I have no other information." "So there's no way to find her?" Erin asked. Her father frowned. "If she wanted to, in so many years she could have already come here herself, if not to me, then at least to you, or at least sent a birthday card." The trip to the village left Erin with mixed impressions. She had hoped so much that she would find a clue as to how to get on her mother's trail. And as much as she hated to admit it, her father's words had hurt her deeply. Surely her mother could have visited her in all those years, and since she hadn't, she didn't want to see her. Well, she would soon have a daughter of her own, and Erin would take care of her. "Tell me, how was your trip?" Jill asked her. After listening to her friend's long story, she sighed. "Well, what is there to say? I guess your father is right. And really, you have many other things to do now. There's a promotion coming up at work, isn't there?" "Yeah," Erin smiled, as the thoughts of work were nice. "Of course, it's only called beautifully junior assistant. In fact, there will be almost no difference in salary. Yes, and the work will consist mainly of bringing and serving." "You'll pass everything," Jill said confidently. "You'll be one step closer to your dream. It's not like scrubbing floors." "You're right, as always. All in all, I'm happy with everything. I just miss Joshua sometimes." Erin looked at Jill, knowing that she would be unhappy at the mention of her failed fiancé, but she suddenly suggested, "I've been thinking, maybe we should ask my acquaintances, those who were at the summer cottage when you met. Someone must have brought him there. You must know someone close to him, or a friend, maybe his parents, his brothers or sisters." "Don't, Jill. I was thinking the same thing. But he's like my mum. If he wanted to, he would have contacted me a long time ago. So when I find him, what am I going to say? 'Hi, Joshua, you're a scoundrel. Here's our daughter. Pay alimony.'" Erin shook her head. "No way. Holly is my daughter. I don't want him to have any rights over her. I'll raise her myself. If she asks who her father is, I'll tell her everything I know." Jill sighed. "Okay, that's up to you. I'll help you in any way I can." Time passed. One day at work, Latrice approached Erin and asked, "Erin, when is your due date?" "Around the beginning of May," replied the girl. "Oh, that's not soon enough." "That's great. Just in time to model in the spring show of Cassandra's new collection." "Modelling?" Erin thought she'd misheard. "I'm not a model, and my belly's already huge." "Just what she needs," Latrice said nonchalantly. "Cassandra is developing a maternity collection and wants to present it in late winter. And she wants you as a model. Don't worry, it's nothing complicated. We'll get you ready. There's not enough time. Meanwhile, here's a list of tomorrow's new responsibilities. You're no longer a cleaning lady, but a junior assistant. Basically, you do whatever I or Cassandra tells you to do. You'll be preparing clothes, shoes, coordinating fittings, making sure all the supplies are in sufficient quantities, and much more. By the way, how long do you plan to work for?" "As long as I can. I'm feeling great and the doctor said it's okay." "That's great. Of course, after the birth you'll be on maternity leave. We all understand that. But keep in mind, Cassandra won't be expecting you for long." "I understand," Erin replied, but she really had no idea what to do. Jill can't babysit, she works. There is no money for a nanny. Who else should I ask? The father? I don't think he'd agree, thought Erin. For a moment, the thought flashed that Jill was right, and that it would be possible to find Joshua and ask for help. He obviously had a lot of money. But Erin was disgusted when she imagined that he would refuse her, or start lying, or justify himself, or say that it wasn't his child. Surely he was counting on never seeing her again. No, Erin was not going to impose. There was a lot of work for the new position. Erin even sometimes thought that staying as a cleaner would involve much less work. But the girl did not complain. She felt great, and at work she was ready to even spend the night. And everything went easily and well with her, as it happens when a person is engaged in their favourite work. Of course, pregnancy made its own adjustments. It was necessary to visit doctors, attend courses for pregnant women, buy things and furniture that would be needed for the future baby. And then there was also preparation for enrolment. One evening, the friends were sitting in front of the TV, watching an old romantic comedy and eating ice cream straight from the big plastic tubs. "Isn't it weird for you?" asked Erin to Jill. "Basically, you and I are complete strangers to each other. We met by chance, and now I've been living in your apartment for more than 6 months. And I've got a baby on the way. Of course, for me, you are an angel who came from heaven, saved me in the most difficult moment. Without you, I would have sat in the village, listening to my stepmother's lectures and milking cows. I'll always be grateful to you, except that sometimes I feel like some kind of parasite who has entered the trust for a good man who lives off him." Jill licked her spoon and shrugged. "No, this situation doesn't seem strange to me at all. Or are you tricking me, plotting to clean me out?" "Of course no," Erin replied with a smile. "Well, that's just fine," Jill said. "I am helping you because I want to and can do it. Remember, a person helps you only if he or she wants to do it, because we always have the right to refuse. I like being friends with you. I'm not the easiest person to get along with, even if it doesn't seem that way at first glance. And you, how can I put it, balance me out well. I don't feel any discomfort from your being here. On the contrary, only joy. Thank you, Jill. I hope someday I'll be able to repay you in kind." "You're already paying," the girl said. "You buy groceries, clean the house. I'm not even talking about the fact that you've practically relieved me of cooking. I hate cooking, and in the future I plan to tell everyone that I once lived with a celebrity from the world of high fashion." Erin laughed. "All right, tell about it. As for cooking, I like it. I'm also thinking about the future when my daughter is born. First time, of course, I'll stay at home. I don't know, a month? 2, 3? Latrice has made it clear that Cassandra won't be expecting me long from maternity leave." "Wait," Jill clarified. "I thought you'd be gaining experience with them until you go to college." "There's a correspondence department. Then I could stay working at the fashion house and study." "Yes, that would be perfect," Jill nodded. "But that's just my dream." Erin sighed sadly. "I haven't yet had the opportunity to prove myself enough for Cassandra to say, 'Yes, that's our future star. I'll leave her on any terms.'" "First of all," Jill said sternly, "dreaming is not a bad thing, especially if your dreams are backed up by action. And yours are definitely backed up. Think about it. More than 6 months ago, you were a naive little country girl. I'm sorry, but you were. Now, you're a young, confident mum-to-be who works at the hottest fashion house in the city. That's quite a leap. Second of all, you have some kind of fashion show at the end of winter. Maybe you can prove yourself there, at least as a model." Erin thought for a moment. "Maybe you're right. If I can be useful to Cassandra in creating her maternity collection, maybe she'll notice my efforts." "Great. What other news do you have?" "Nothing else," replied Erin. But she was lying. Yesterday, Erin saw her mother. Latrice had sent her to pick up a box with terribly expensive, exclusive costume jewellery for a new photo shoot. "You're not a stupid girl," she said to Erin, "but just to clear my conscience, if you lose it, Cassandra will take 3 hides, and she won't care that you're pregnant." "Understood," Erin nodded. The valuable cargo had to be picked up from a luxury shopping centre. The brand representatives had an office there. Erin had not been here before, and she was curious to see the expensive boutiques, the elegant fountain on the first floor, the beautifully dressed customers. She used to think that all rich women dressed very stylishly, but now she realized that only 2 out of 10 women seemed tastefully dressed. Erin took the box without any problems and decided to go downstairs on the big transparent elevator. It travelled slowly, stopping at each floor, so there was an opportunity to look a little more at the new world of wealth for her. On the 7th floor, a whole flock of very young girls entered, all with many bags. Erin pressed herself against the transparent back wall of the elevator and turned to face it to continue her observations. Suddenly, a woman caught her attention. She was coming out of some boutique, accompanied by 2 tall, almost identical men in black, obviously security guards. The woman was wearing a light white dress. Her luxurious blonde hair flowed easily over her shoulders, and her large blue eyes looked somewhere thoughtful in the distance. Erin recognized her at once. It was her mother. Although she hadn't seen her for more than 10 years, she hadn't changed at all. Erin's heart pounded and her legs gave out, and she almost dropped the precious box. The elevator passed very close to the place where the dazzling beauty in white stood with her guards, and for a moment Erin thought that her mother looked at her and even recognized her. On her face flashed either amazement or fear. But the elevator, all the way up to this barely crawling, here as if by chance, flew downward with an arrow and did not stop until the 1st floor. The girls with the bags got out and Erin followed them. She didn't know what to do. Should she rush back upstairs and start looking for her mother all over the mall? Suddenly, the nausea hit her, and she almost ran to the exit for fresh air. On the street she felt a little better, and she was already hesitating. Maybe this woman just looked alike. Especially, Erin had only seen her for a few seconds. Most likely her brain, flooded with hormones and suffering from hypoxia in the stuffy elevator, saw blonde hair, blue eyes, and slipped her the belief she wanted to believe. Nevertheless, this episode now constantly rose before Erin's eyes. Toward the end of January, Erin began to realize for the first time that she was pregnant. No, psychologically she understood it, but with her body, she felt only periodic movements of her daughter, and that was all. What the other girls told her about swelling, fatigue, weakness had bypassed her. But now she became slower. She didn't want to get up early. It became harder to put on her shoes in the afternoon. She wanted to lie down. Jill noticed it first. "Okay, Erin, you need to regroup your strength," she said. "Focus on work and do less housework." "Who's going to take care of the house then? You work all the time too." "Why don't we invite Melissa to visit us for a month or 2? Jill met Erin's stepmother when she went with her friend to the village to celebrate Christmas. She charmed everyone there. Dave, it seems, literally fell in love with her and even regretted that he had to leave for a shift in a few days. The stepmother was unusually lively and friendly to the pregnant stepdaughter, showing unexpected warmth and care. Even the father became a little less glum than usual. Melissa, Erin tried to imagine her stepmother in a city apartment. She won't go. She has a household there, and the father won't let her go. She doesn't like the city, and she doesn't like me. Her friend smiled slyly and averted her eyes. Erin knew when Jill had that look. "Are you two already making a deal behind my back?" she asked, astounded. "Well, not exactly made a deal," Jill answered evasively, "but before we left, there was such a conversation. I told her she could stay in my apartment if she wanted a break from country life. She didn't mind. She was worried about you, by the way." Yes, some help wouldn't hurt, but Erin didn't really want to accept it from her stepmother, though there was no other options anyway. Okay, let her come. Inside, she had already prepared herself for the stepmother to pester her with reproaches unsolicited advice and opinions that Erin was doing everything wrong. But to her surprise, for the first 2 or 3 weeks the guest was quieter than water, but her help was very noticeable. Now Erin could afford to get up an hour later. Breakfast and the container with lunch were already waiting for her on the table. In the evening, she and Jill would return to the clean, cosy apartment, even from the stairwell, smelling the scent of homemade pies, or potatoes with mushrooms, or duck baked according to an old recipe. "Yes, Melissa, we can't lose weight with you," Jill said cheerfully to her once during dinner. "By the way, how do you know such recipes?" Erin wondered. Melissa shrugged. "Jill showed me how to look for things on the internet. I know that girls now take care of their figures, and I read that it's not good for pregnant women to gain too much weight. It makes labour difficult and affects the baby negatively. So I started searching for delicious and healthy food recipes." "Thank you," said Erin sincerely. The stepmother seemed slightly embarrassed, her cheeks turning slightly pink. She habitually waved her hand away. "What else should I do here all day long? Putting things in order, going to the store. It takes 2 hours. It's boring just sitting around all day, so I'm looking for recipes." The stepmother suddenly started revealing herself to Erin from another side. It was hard to understand what had changed, whether she was finally resting from the hard village life and her silent husband, or whether Erin had grown up and Melissa no longer felt the need to teach her about life. It turned out that her stepmother was a very caring and gentle woman, thinking about others almost more than herself. However, Erin suddenly realised that she had always been like that. She had never deprived her stepdaughter of anything. She had never given her less than her own son Dave. Most likely, she just didn't know how to express her love and give affection, something that a little girl growing up without a mother desperately needed. Now she was interested in Erin's life and work. At first, she secretly listened to Erin telling Jill something. Then she started sitting next to them and eventually asked the meaning of words she didn't understand. For Jill, Melissa became like a friend. They somehow easily found a common language, and with Jill's encouragement, the woman began to read books, watch movies, and they even went for walks together if Erin was busy. The day of Cassandra's spring fashion show had arrived. The whole previous week had merged into one endlessly long, hectic day for Erin. She probably wouldn't have survived without Melissa's magic soups and chicken cutlets. While it seemed that everything was going according to schedule, and Erin expected to have a couple of days to rest before the show, the experienced Latrice immediately told her that it wouldn't be the case. "You'll see, Cassandra will have a meltdown in a few days. She'll be thrashing around like a tornado, tearing everyone and everything to shreds, and screaming that everything is wrong. Get ready." Erin couldn't believe it. Cassandra looked absolutely calm, but everything happened just as Latrice had predicted. Exactly 1 week later, Erin walked into the studio as usual, bringing the last 2 boxes of shoes, and barely dodged a purse flying past her face. "No!" cried Cassandra. "This is all entirely wrong. It's horrible. This was a failed idea from the start. They will look like cows in those dresses. No one's going to buy it. My career will end at this show. The house will go bankrupt, and this place will be turned into a beer bar." Judging by the aides huddled in the corners, Cassandra had been raging for a long time. Only Latrice stood firmly near her boss, apparently trying to say something. Erin clenched her palms into fists for courage and walked over to her boss with an innocent smile. "Cassandra, let's try it on me now," she suggested in a sweet voice. "We'll see what's wrong right away. There's plenty of time to make adjustments." The woman lit a cigarette. "What's there possible to adjust? There's only one way. Put all these rags in a pile and set them on fire." Latrice glanced quickly at the other assistants, and they, as if on cue, began praising Cassandra's genius. She pursed her lips capriciously and rolled her eyes like a little girl. "You're all sycophants," she barked, but it was obvious that the flattery had worked. "Okay, Erin, put on those overalls over there." As Erin changed and walked down the makeshift catwalk, Cassandra's face became even grimmer than usual. "Something's wrong," she said, "but I can't figure out what it is." Erin regained her courage and said, "The belt is unnecessary. It seems like it should emphasize the waist, except that I don't have one, and it ridiculously divides the figure into two uneven parts. If you take it off, the look will be softer and smoother." Cassandra said, and in a few ruthless moments, she ripped away the sewn-in belt. "Yes, it's better now." After that, they made adjustments to the entire collection in the remaining time. But despite this, Erin still had a growing excitement. It was scary to imagine that she, a girl from the village in her late stages of pregnancy, would be going on the runway in front of a full audience. "What do you have to be afraid of?" Latrice encouraged her. "Your boss is a beast, and you're not afraid of her. And walking on the catwalk is just a walk. I'm sorry, but this is Cassandra's night, not your recital. You'll be looked at as one of many models, nothing more. But they'll examine every one of Cassandra's designs under a microscope, looking for flaws and scrutinizing every detail." Erin was reassured by this. Indeed, her role was to go out 3 times, walk along the path with a series of similar pregnant girls, among whom they weren't even professional models, and then quietly go to rest. But Cassandra would have to endure all the critics, competitors, journalists, and those who wanted to express their opinions. Jill and Melissa came to support the young debutante. As a thank you, Erin herself prepared their outfits for the show. Jill wore a long emerald green dress that complemented her curly red hair, and her stepmother wore an elegant light beige suit pant. She even straightened her back, and no one would now think that this woman had lived in the village all her life. Erin didn't even remember her first appearance. The hall in front of her eyes merged into one big blur, and she only mechanically stepped over her feet and maintained a trained smile on her face. When she came backstage, Latrice hugged her tightly. "Erin, you're a smart girl. That was wonderful. Quickly, change for the second walk." The second time was already a little calmer. She even spotted Jill and her stepmother in the 3rd row with her eyes and smiled at them. At the same time, a vague uneasiness came over her. Erin didn't understand what caused it. Her stomach didn't ache, so it definitely wasn't related to the baby. It seemed like she saw something. But what? "Erin, change your clothes quickly, you're closing the show," Latrice shouted to her. For the 3rd time, even though she was the last to go, Erin was absolutely confident. The show was almost over, and judging by Cassandra's satisfied face, everything had gone great. The audience's reaction made it clear that they were enjoying everything. Erin's eyes glanced at the front row, and she almost tripped when she saw a fragile blonde in a dazzling black dress. It was her! There could be no doubt now. Her mother was looking right at her. Erin didn't realize how she didn't faint or drop everything and run to her right off the stage. On autopilot, the girl finished her walk, remaining on stage with the rest of the models. She even seemed to clap and smile when Cassandra came out, and the audience greeted her with a round of applause. But Erin herself didn't take her eyes off the woman in the front row. Her mother recognized her. She certainly did. Barely waiting for them to get off the stage, Erin ran without even changing her clothes. The guests from the show moved to the next room, where the buffet was to take place. The girl squeezed among the guests. Someone recognized her, said compliments, but she heard nothing, looking for familiar blonde hair and a black dress in the crowd. "Mum!" she finally cried out. There was no doubt now. She hadn't changed much in 12 years, but maybe her cheekbones had gotten a little sharper, her gaze a little harder. "Erin?" the woman said cautiously and lightly touched her arm. She looked more frightened than pleased. "Did you recognize me, Mum?" Erin asked cheerfully. "Of course, my girl. How could I not recognize my baby, even though you have grown up?" The mother nodded at Erin's belly with a smile. You're getting ready to become a mother. I was hoping you wouldn't have it as early as I did." "Early?" Erin asked, perplexed. Her mother looked away, apparently not wanting to draw unnecessary attention to them. Somewhere in the distance she could see vaguely familiar silhouettes of men dressed in black. Erin remembered them as the security guards who had been with her mother at the mall back then. "Let's step back a little," the mother asked affectionately. They walked through the halls and out onto a covered balcony where it was warm and empty. The mother sighed, rubbed her temples, and seemingly determined to tell everything, began. "I wasn't even 18 when you were born. I told Sean about the pregnancy right after the wedding. He figured out the truth later." "The truth?" Erin asked, and then she realized. "I'm not his daughter, right?" The mother lowered her eyes. "Yes, I was very young, stupid and spoiled back then. My parents are very wealthy people, and they never denied me anything. That must have played a part. When I became a teenager, I suddenly started showing my rebellious side, drinking, smoking, going out with different bad guys, and then one day, for reasons I can't remember, I had a fight with my parents. I decided to run away from home and start a new life. I found a new boyfriend, and we started renting an apartment. I had money. Then I found out I was pregnant, and that's when I met Sean. He was so simple, so honest, entirely different from the guys I had been with before. I thought the universe was sending me a sign. I went away with him to a village so my parents wouldn't find me. We got married, and then you were born." "And then?" Erin asked in a completely dry voice. Her mother looked at her guiltily and immediately averted her eyes. "I couldn't live there. The youthful fervour ran out quickly. I realized I was still too young to be anyone's wife, let alone a mother." She suddenly took her daughter's hand, and Erin barely held back from pulling her hand away. "I tried, honestly," the mother continued. "You should know how much I convinced myself to stay. Every night when you and Sean fell asleep, I looked at you and said, 'Here they are, my family, my husband, my child.' But I felt nothing. You were like guards keeping me in a cage I couldn't escape from." "Like guards?" Erin asked, feeling tears running down her cheeks. "And one day I just ran away," her mother continued, as if not hearing her. "At first I wanted to leave a note to explain everything to you and Sean, but I couldn't find the words." "But why didn't you even send a card on my birthday for 12 years?" asked Erin quietly. Her mother lowered her head. "Did you go back to your parents?" Erin asked, without getting the answer on her previous question. "Yes." "You didn't tell them about me?" "No." "Do you know who my real father is?" The mother shrugged. "Honestly, I don't really remember anymore. I was going through a rough patch back then, and after I came back to the city, I didn't see anyone else of those friends." "Do you live with your parents now?" The woman shook her head negatively, saying very quietly, "No, with my husband. He's a very wealthy man and very jealous." Then she bit her lower lip and added in a kind of pathetic, pleading tone, "I'd hate for him to find out about you. You wouldn't give me away, would you?" Erin shook her head in the negative. Her mother suddenly perked up and smiled as if a wonderful idea had occurred to her. "If you like, I'll be sure to introduce you to your grandparents. Yes, and you and I can see each other whenever you want." But looking back at the guards, she added, "Well, maybe not very often. But I can call or write you sometimes." "Is that what you want, Mum?" Erin asked bluntly and looked her in the eye. Her mother looked both guilty and frightened at the same time. Erin suddenly realized that now her mother was not at all happy to see her. Maybe in the first minute she was happy because she thought that now she would remove the burden of guilt that had been on her shoulders for so many years. But now she seemed more afraid of what her rich new husband would think of her. Currently, Erin looked away and noticed her stepmother through the glass door of the balcony. Melissa seemed to be searching for her, appearing anxious. Suddenly, Melissa turned her head and their eyes met, bringing relief to her stepmother's face. And Erin was reminded of a time when she was 11 years old and had caught the flu. Her temperature had risen to 40 degrees, and her stepmother had stayed by her side for 3 days, tirelessly wiping her with a wet towel, giving her raspberry drinks and broths, and placing her cool palm on her forehead. She also recalled their trip to a neighbouring town to find the perfect fabric for her graduation dress. They had spent half a day at the market until finally finding it. Erin felt embarrassed when her stepmother haggled vigorously, eventually lowering the price. It was only after paying that Erin realised her stepmother had used her last bit of money for the purchase. Without the negotiation, they wouldn't have been able to afford it. Where had her biological mother been all these years? She had chosen not to involve her parents, even keeping them unaware of their role as grandparents. Her mother had never grown up, playing the role of a carefree girl. When she grew bored, she left her husband and easily removed her daughter from her life, just as a careless student tears out a spoiled sheet from a notebook. Then she returned to her parents, pretending to be an innocent girl who had misbehaved. Finally, she found a new husband who now protected and treated her as if she was still a little girl. How had Erin been so blind throughout her life? "You will find your mother twice more, first falsely, then for real." Erin remembered those words clearly now. She opened the glass door and walked towards her stepmother. There were things Melissa was going to say, but before she could, Erin tightly embraced her. "What are you doing?" Melissa asked fearfully, gently stroking Erin's back. "We were worried about you." "You were talking to someone. Who was it?" "Nobody," Erin replied firmly. "Nobody." "Nice name you picked out for your daughter, after all. The name Holly suits her very well," Melissa said contentedly, pushing the stroller with her granddaughter along the park path. Erin smiled. Holly was growing up to be a calm and sweet girl at just 3 months old. Erin had already started working again, leaving her newborn daughter in the care of her grandmother. Occasionally, Erin took her daughter to work with her. Cassandra decided to develop a children's clothing line and invited Erin to take part in the development. "I think that's a great idea, don't you?" her boss calmly said. "After the spring show, we practically dominated the market for pregnant women. It's logical that they would now want to dress their children with our brand too." But she understood that she couldn't have done it without Melissa's help, and she was truly grateful to her for that. However, it seemed that Melissa enjoyed it too. Sometimes the woman would return to her own home to check on her husband and the house, but she would always come back within a week. "Doesn't your husband miss you?" Jill once asked her. Melissa shrugged. "He was never emotionally attached to me, even when we got married. He used to say, 'I help you raise your son and you help me raise my daughter. We share household responsibilities. That's all our love is. I am certain he doesn't miss me.'" In the city, Melissa felt better and enjoyed taking walks with Erin and her little granddaughter in the park. One day, a woman admired a beautiful black Mercedes on the opposite side of the street. Erin looked at it and felt a shiver. The car seemed strangely familiar to her. A moment later, a tall and handsome man with piercing dark eyes stepped out of the Mercedes, accompanied by a long-legged brunette in a short dress. Erin recognized him instantly, but to her surprise she no longer felt anything for Joshua. "Don't go back to the past, look to the future." She remembered the elderly woman's words. She smiled, turning away from the car, and pushed the stroller deeper into the park. Seth Eldon, a 56-year-old businessman, an owner of a trading company, was content with his life. Together with his wife, he built his business from scratch and achieved great success in the field. He did not complain about the revenue, colleagues, or various unforeseen circumstances, because the work was already established and on track. Seth and Jennifer had a peaceful and trusting marriage. Jennifer was previously active in the affairs of the firm, but recently devoted herself to home cooking and gardening. While reading important papers, Seth was interrupted by a knock on his office door. "Come in," he answered simply. Mary entered, wearing a warm jacket sprinkled with snow. The woman had recently started working as a janitor in the office, and it was her second encounter with Mr. Eldon. Mary was holding 8-year-old Drew by the hand, whose hat was off to the side and whose tightly wound scarf was unwound. "Mr. Eldon, this boy says you're his daddy. That's why I brought him here." Seth immediately jumped up from his seat. "Drew, what happened? Come in." The boy was still silent, and Mary had to explain everything herself. "I went to the store to get some detergent, which suddenly ran out. I was walking back by the pond, and suddenly I saw the boys playing on the ice, and then they all ran away. And your boy froze from fear. I guess the ice cracked under his feet. Everyone was scared. I cautiously approached him, took him by the hand, and led him to the edge of the lake. He was so scared. I asked him where he lived, and he said his dad was the director in our building." "That's the truth. I'm his dad." Seth Eldon smiled, a little doomed. He then stroked his son's head. "Didn't you get your feet wet at least?" "No," replied Drew, avoiding eye contact. "He's a tomboy." Seth tried to explain everything to his employee. "I didn't even think he was afraid of anything. Probably, again, he ran away from lessons without warning anyone. What a stubborn boy. All right, it's a family matter. Drew, I'll talk to you at home. As for you, Mary, you may have saved my son's life. Thank you for being so concerned. I'll take him home now, solve the issue, and talk to you again." "All right, Mr. Eldon, and I'll go back to work for now. I've got an off schedule." Mary was not embarrassed by her own sad situation. She needed work, and so she continued working, even though she was pregnant. She came to Seth's company a few weeks ago and told the personnel department that she was expecting a child. "But I'm ready to work. You won't have any problems with me," Mary told Mr. Arnott, the head of the personnel department. "How do you imagine it? You'll go around the floors with your belly, carrying buckets and rags? Don't spare yourself or our reputation. What if you get sick while cleaning? Then you'll sue us. We know about people like you. You're only after your own profit," Mr. Arnott objected. "I don't have any bad intentions," Mary answered. "My family is going through a difficult period. I really need this job." Mary's assurances did not convince Mr. Arnott. Luckily for Mary, at that moment Mr. Eldon was in the office, and he heard the whole conversation. "Are you sure you can take the strain?" he asked. Smiling hopefully, Mary turned to him and said, "I'm sure, 100%. "Well, then it's worth giving her a chance, Mr. Arnott. If a person has a desire to work, there's no need to discourage it. We need a cleaner as much as she needs us, don't we?" "Of course, Mr. Eldon, everything will be done," Mr. Arnott said, looking spitefully at Mary. "You have some paperwork to fill out." Mr. Arnott had held his position for many years, and he was strict with his subordinates, following his own system and demanding that others adhere to it as well. He disliked when things didn't go according to plan, and the arrival of the energetic and pregnant Mary on staff had spoiled his mood. He believed that she had humiliated him by forcing him to hire her against his first intention. So now, a vengeful Mr. Arnott nagged Mary with various criticisms. "Mary, you assured me that you would not fall behind schedule, but I see that it is not the first time," he said in an instructive tone. "Perhaps your pregnancy hinders you." No, I have no problem. It won't happen again, Mr. Arnott," used to answer poor Mary, who was distressed about losing her job. Being a janitor was not her dream job, but she had no other choice. Michael, the father of her future child, was not from a wealthy family, and he too was trying to earn money for a decent wedding. The couple had not expected a baby in their lives so soon, so they were unprepared for the various expenses that would come their way. "I feel terrible that you have to get up so early every day and work with your morning sickness," Michael regretted, hugging his bride. "I'm a man after all. I have to provide for the whole family." "Don't worry, we're both adults and should be responsible for our decisions. Not everyone has money right away. Yes, we rushed, but we can manage, Mary encouraged her beloved. Michael truly loved her and dreamed of a family. However, his mother was not thrilled with his choice of spouse. Sonny, Mary is not a match for you. What were you thinking when you chose her? Mum, don't talk about her like that. You and I have different values. For me, Mary is the perfect woman. That's what you say now. And when the need takes you by the throat, then you'll understand why I wanted someone else for you. You're a good-looking guy, not stupid. You should try to get the attention of someone more powerful. Your father and I couldn't give you a better life, but you have all the qualities to have it. Mum, do you think I'm some kind of gigolo? Michael was immediately angry. I love and respect you, but sometimes you say things that I can't understand. Mary and I will manage. Just don't get in the way. Please. His mother often used her influence on him. Michael was her only child, and she kept taking care of him as if he were still a baby. Several times his mother tried to turn Mary and Michael against each other, but they constantly confronted her with their great trust and love. The young people did not succumb to any of her tricks, and every time they had quarrels, they sorted out the situation and decided to stay together. But Michael's mother believed that she had the right to express her dissatisfaction with Mary because, after Michael met her, he became completely uncontrollable. I don't know what he sees in that girl, she complained to her close friends. Only if Mary were a beauty, I would understand why he's with her. I am almost sure there's definitely something witchy about her. Maybe she's bewitched, my boy. Oh, Sarah, you like to dramatize. Her friend tried to calm the woman down. Don't say that, Mrs. Dawes said. I'd like to see how you'd feel if your son spent all his savings on a wedding to a poor girl like that, instead of on his own father's surgery. Yeah, poor Bill is suffering so much, and you're right, your Michael's priorities have shifted. Meanwhile, Michael's father really liked Mary. Mr. Dawes saw no evil in her, unlike his wife. Mrs. Dawes was ready to enumerate for an eternity why Mary was an unsuitable bride for their son, but not Mr. Dawes. He saw tenderness, care and integrity in his future daughter-in-law. He himself needed expensive heart surgery, but the family had no opportunity to afford it yet. Bill Dawes was the main breadwinner all his life, but now he could no longer work as hard as he did before, and Michael had his own worries with Mary and their future baby. Don't listen to your mother, son. She's always nagging and doesn't always understand things, he said, dismissing his wife's reproaches. I know, Dad, but it's not nice. Mary doesn't deserve to be treated like that. She treats my mum with all her heart, and she's always pushing her away. Mum should finally get over our coming marriage, especially because Mary is carrying your grandchild. She'll get used to it, Bill consoled his son. You'll see. I know her well. On the day of the near tragedy at the pond, after talking to the boss, Mary continued cleaning the office, and Mr. Eldon took his son home. He didn't give Drew an educational talk. The boy sat pouting as if he had been insulted, though his father did not even reprimand him. When Drew arrived at home, he lowered his head and presented himself before Jennifer. Well, what happened again? She asked tiredly. After all, such visits home were becoming more frequent. Skipping classes, he was playing with the boys on the pond near our office and almost fell through the ice. If my employee had not taken him away from there, he would have fallen under the ice. Drew, you can't do that. You have to think a little bit about your actions and imagine the consequences. Your prank is very dangerous, Jennifer frowned. The spouses tried not to raise their voices, intimidate their son, or punish him strongly. Drew did not accept their words and continued to do whatever came into his head. But the spouses did not give up and remained understanding of his behaviour. Promise me that you will no longer walk in dangerous places. Seth gently but insistently asked his son. Drew frowned, but realized that everyone was waiting for his answer. "Okay, I promise," he said. At times, Seth felt he was not a good enough parent. He knew how to conduct business, press his partners, and get them to agree to certain terms of the deal, as well as make an impression and use his influence in the business sphere. However, he did not understand how to behave with an 8-year-old boy. When Seth returned to the office, he immediately asked to look for Mary and invited her to him. 15 minutes later, Mary entered the director's office after a polite knock. "Have a seat, please. How are you feeling? Nothing hurts after today?" "I'm fine, don't worry, I'm not hurt," Mary smiled. After her first meeting with Mr. Eldon, she had a good impression of her boss. Not every big business owner would worry about their employees, take care of them, and show gratitude. "Mary, I want to say thank you very much. I am ready to write you a bonus because you have been so attentive to my son. You're about to become a mum yourself, and you understand what I'm experiencing right now." "No, Mr. Eldon, you don't need to give me any bonuses. But I have a request." "What is it? I'm listening." "I need 3 days off. My husband and I are getting married. It's a small one, but it requires a lot of preparation." "Why don't I pay for it?" Seth offered easily. "I'm serious, Mary. Accept my gratitude." "Whose services should I pay for? Photographer? Banquet hall? I can afford it. Besides, I'm very pleased to contribute to such an event." "Thank you, Mr. Eldon, but that's too much. We won't be able to accept such a gift." Mary even blushed. She did not expect such a broad gesture. While such spending was trifling for Seth, she could not imagine easily parting with such a sum of money. "I am sincere. Don't refuse. I won't give up anyway. I can see you're a good person. To be honest, not many people at work know, but we recently adopted Drew. He's stubborn, uncooperative, used to fighting for his place in the sun in the orphanage. And here he has everything, but he hasn't realized it yet. My wife and I don't scold him too much. We don't want to scare him. You know, I grew up in an orphanage myself. I understand what you and your son are going through. Orphans can be challenging, but you'll get through it. I can see that you care, and Drew is a good boy. His temper and distrust are showing now, but he will relax when he realizes that you will not give up on him. He's already been abandoned once, so he doesn't trust you and scares you away. As for me, I came here to earn money from another city, but met my love here, and now we're expecting a baby," Mary said. "If it's a boy, I'll name him after you. And please come to our wedding with your whole family. We'll be waiting for you." Seth did not refuse the invitation. Mary was pleasant to him, and Drew also wanted to see his saviour again. "Jennifer, my dear, we've been invited to a wedding next week," Seth announced to his spouse. "My new employee, who took Drew off the ice, invited us." "Would that be appropriate? We don't know her at all." The woman hesitated, but was interested. "Are we going to the wedding?" Drew ran out from around the corner into the centre of the room. "Can't hide anything from you, little prankster," the father smiled at Drew. "Will this event make you happy?" "I've never been invited to a wedding before. I don't know what's going to happen there." "Come here," Jennifer beckoned to her son. "First, I'll tell you how the celebration goes, what the bride and groom do, and what the guests do. The main thing for you is to memorize that you need to behave appropriately and look nice." The boy listened to his foster parents without interrupting. For him, the new world of his family seemed exciting, yet unreliable. The strangers who now took care of him were attentive and kind to him, but it was hard for the boy to believe that he would not be abandoned again. Drew couldn't really call them Mum and Dad yet, but he really wanted them to make it work. Drew tried his best, But none of his old tricks worked. His antics used to make the tutors mad, but Seth and Jennifer seemed different. They were patient, attentive and kind. They were in no hurry to limit Drew or punish him, and the boy was beginning to realize that he could take away his prickles and let the adults love him. "I understand. I'll behave so I don't embarrass you," said Drew after the educational talk. He went to bed thinking about the upcoming ceremony. The same evening, on the other side of the city, there was another conversation. As soon as Mary rustled the keys in the hallway of the apartment, Michael immediately met her. "Hello, my sunshine." Michael kissed the bride on the cheek and addressed his unborn child, putting his hands around her belly. "What did you and Mummy do today? Was she worried?" "Everything was fine," Mary replied with a smile. After her story about rescuing Drew, Michael was very frightened. "Are you crazy? What if you had gone underwater together with that boy?" he asked, looking at Mary with undisguised displeasure. "How could you risk yourself and our child? Don't you think so at all? You're always trying to help everyone. They won't even thank you later." "Michael, don't get upset. Here I am, unharmed. Why worry? If I hadn't reacted in time, one family would have had grief today." "You're the main rescuer in the world, aren't you? Please at least don't risk the baby. You're not alone anymore, and you're not only responsible for yourself." Michael didn't back down, knowing he had a right to be angry. "I understand you. I'm sorry. I promise I won't jeopardize our lives again. I didn't even think about it. I just did it, that's all," Mary admitted, realizing that she and Drew were just lucky today. After a brief altercation, Michael cooled down. He knew who he was going to marry. Mary was kind-hearted and could never pass by those who were in trouble. Although these traits attracted Michael to her, he was afraid that one day they might put her in danger. After bathing, Mary settled comfortably on the sofa in front of the TV. Michael stretched her tired legs, put a pillow under her head to make her more comfortable, and left her to rest. Meeting Drew stirred Mary's memory. She remembered her orphan childhood in the orphanage, all the difficulties, and the main question that tormented every abandoned child. Who were her parents? Mary did not remember anything about herself. She only knew, from her teachers, that she had been found at a bus stop when she was 3 years old. "You were such a sweet," Marina said to her one day. The kind tutor put her whole soul into her upbringing and genuinely cared about every child in the orphanage, despite the whole system. "You had no belongings and no distinguishing features, not a note. I remember the morning when you were first brought to the orphanage. At first you were silent, unable to reconcile yourself to the change of scenery. There was not a single familiar face around. Everything was new. Many kids, routines. I've met kids like that. I was afraid that you wouldn't talk because of psychological trauma. But after a couple of days, you became more active and found a common language with others," explained Marina. Mary had nowhere to get more specific information about her early childhood. The police were unable to find her relatives and had no record of her parents, although several nearby towns and villages had been alerted. The only reminder of her past life was a silver pendant on a chain in the shape of a heart. It had an engraving with Mary's name on it, from which Marina had learned her name. This important clue forced law enforcement officers to visit every jewellery shop and interview all the jewellery dealers in the markets, but that did not help either. Mary wore the chain with the pendant, dear to her heart, only on special occasions. She did not want to show it off all the time and planned to wear it on her wedding day. For several days in a row, Mary constantly called Mr. Eldon, whom, to her great surprise and objection, undertook all the costs of the upcoming celebration. The young woman consulted him about the price, not wanting to be impudent. Mary already realized that Mr. Eldon would not refuse his offer, so she accepted it. The upcoming great celebration made Mary dizzy. She had never felt like a princess from a fairy tale before, but her wedding promised to be just that. "Wow!" sighed Michael, seeing what kind of banquet hall they had thanks to her boss's efforts. "Mr. Eldon is a wonderful man." "That's right," Mary laughed, taking her groom's hand. "We'll be surrounded by such beauty. We deserve it for once." With Mr. Eldon's help, Mary was able to take care of the banquet hall, the musicians, and the toastmaster. As a wedding gift, Mr. Eldon ordered a local music band to entertain the guests. "Wow! What a feast rolled up!" exclaimed Mrs. Dawes, walking around the hall, which was decorated in the early morning of the day of the wedding. "I don't believe some rich man would be willing to spend money on this for nothing." "What are you talking about?" asked Mary, suspecting some hint in her mother-in-law's words. "I think maybe you're having a fling with him. That's why he's so generous. Maybe the grandson isn't mine at all," said the woman angrily, and she kicked out an eyebrow stubbornly. "You're out of your mind. God forbid. Mr. Eldon is old enough to be my father. What an imagination you have." Mary waved away, deciding not to spoil her mood on such a day. No matter how hard Mrs. Dawes tried, but she could not make her daughter-in-law mad and upset the wedding. She did not resort to decisive action, knowing that her son would not forgive her. So she had nothing to do but pester Mary with petty mischief. Mr. Eldon, Jennifer, and Drew were ready to leave for the restaurant. Jennifer really wanted to meet Mary and express her gratitude for saving her son's life. Drew wore a classic suit tailored to his figure, proudly holding a bouquet of white roses. He volunteered to congratulate the newlyweds and hug his rescuer. "Are you worried? It's going to be fun there. You'll love it. Maybe you'll even invite some girls to dance." "I can't dance," Drew said, immediately embarrassed, and turned away to the window. "Don't worry. Daddy and I will show you," Jennifer encouraged. "It's not difficult, but it's very pleasant." Seth and Jennifer complimented the tastefully decorated hall and the impressive kitchen. The celebration had around 40 guests. Drew was the first to run up to Mary and hand her a lush bouquet. The second was Jennifer, who couldn't hold back her tears at the sight of the bride's tender appearance. "Happiness to you. Take care of each other. This is the most important thing," Jennifer said, hugging the bride and groom in turn. "Thank you very much, Mrs. Eldon." Mary smiled back at her. "We are truly grateful to you," the groom added. "This feast would not have been as bright without your participation. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts." "Don't mention it. You saved the most precious thing for us." Jennifer drew her son to her and stroked his shoulder. "By the way, he wanted to congratulate you very much. He couldn't wait. He even dreamed he was here." "Well then, I'll dance with you." Mary winked at Drew and he blushed. When Mr. Eldon's turn came to congratulate the young couple, he hugged Mary and then suddenly recoiled when he noticed familiar jewellery on her chest. The pendant in the shape of a heart. He would never forget it. It was strange that Jennifer had been so engrossed in the festivities and pleasantries that she hadn't noticed this piece of jewellery. "Mary, where did you get this?" Mr. Eldon asked, unable to tear his gaze away from it. Mary was alarmed by the question. She immediately wrapped her fingers around the small silver heart and began twirling it nervously. "It's the only thing left to me from my parents," she said in a low voice. "I had no other things. The police used it to search for my father and mother, but is it familiar to you?" "It can't be." Suddenly Jennifer gasped beside her husband, and at that moment he blacked out from reality. He could no longer take in what was happening. His name was being called from all directions, but it was as if the words didn't reach his ears, blending unrecognizable sounds. Mr. Eldon's consciousness plunged into the distant past, into the time when he himself was still a child. He grew up pampered by his parents, who rarely scolded him for pranks. They instilled good manners, knowing that their son would definitely grow up to be a big shot. Little Seth was inquisitive and cheerful. People always gathered around him, calling him the soul of the party. Seth got used to success. He often went to sports competitions, performed with poems and songs, and participated in school plays. His parents were proud of Seth and believed that he would attend a prestigious university, and so it happened. The son did not disappoint their expectations. In just a couple of months after entering the university, he became a real star of the faculty, which no one left unnoticed. Situations where most people were lost, he took as a challenge. The cheerful nature of the curious guy could not fail to attract girls. Jennifer immediately discerned a charismatic young man at the birthday party of a mutual acquaintance. However, she did not hurry to develop an acquaintance. "And how do you like Seth? He has no girlfriend at the moment. Shall I give him your number?" her friend asked her. "No, you shouldn't," Jennifer cut her off. She believed that guys around whom there were a lot of noise and girls were usually not worth trusting. "I don't think he's serious. I wouldn't go out with him." "Well, you should. Seth is a decent guy. You can count on him as a friend." Jennifer's plans didn't involve Seth paying attention to her. Later on, they remembered how Seth tried to get Jennifer's attention and how strict she was with him. "I wanted to give up almost immediately because I was tired of you not giving me a pass," Jennifer shared her memories. "And why have you so long pretended that you were not interested in me?" perplexed Seth. "It was interesting to see what other tricks you would try," she laughed. "It was important for me to know that I'm not just a trophy for you." Seth's family was warm towards Jennifer, knowing that their son would never choose an unworthy woman as his wife. Jennifer was close to her parents-in-law, almost as close as she was with her own parents. The first few months of their married life were filled with happiness. They soon wanted to have a child and did not delay the pregnancy. However, their lives were overshadowed by Jennifer's severe toxemia and dizziness. "Let's live with my parents for a while," Seth suggested to his spouse. "I'm constantly at work, and I can't focus on anything knowing that you're here alone. And if something happens to you, I won't forgive myself." "You're right," Jennifer agreed. "It would be better this way. I don't want you to worry about me. By the way, you got so thin when things went up. Financial prosperity is nice, but then there's not enough money to put you back on your feet. Please take care of yourself as well, and don't forget to eat." "I know, honey, I know, but now is the peak." Seth excused himself. "If I let up at this point, we may never reach this level later. Be patient. I'll do my best to be home more often. And Mum and Dad will look after you." "Okay, dear," Jennifer said. She had unsolicited tears in her eyes due to raging hormones that made her sensitive to everything, even when she didn't want to show how upset she was. At her parents-in-law's house, Jennifer was really calm and constantly under supervision. She could immediately get help if she started to feel dizzy. Little Mary was born prematurely, but it didn't harm her health or her mother's. Jennifer was exhausted from the pregnancy, but now she was glad that everything was over. "What a cute baby," Seth sighed, looking at his daughter through the window of the maternity hospital. He wasn't allowed in the ward, so he had to look at his baby from afar. "Seth, I can't believe that this is our creation. I just got used to the belly, and now the baby is born." The whole family took care of little Mary, surrounding her with love and attention. She was growing up with the love of many people. The girl never gave her parents any major trouble. She quickly internalized what was explained to her, and Seth was crazy about his little girl. "Daddy's daughter," everyone who saw Mary said with a smile. "An exact copy. That's the most offensive thing. laughed Jennifer. "So I surrendered for months on end, and now she looks just like her daddy, and she's always clinging to him." On Mary's second birthday, Seth gave her a unique gift, a silver heart-shaped pendant. And since then, Mary has never taken off the beautiful jewellery and proudly showed off her father's gift to everyone. Jennifer and Seth lived contentedly, believing that they now had everything they needed. They looked toward the future with a smile. The family also had loyal and trustworthy friends. During gatherings, the children played together, and little Mary easily mingled with the other children. Thanks to his wealth, Seth could afford to buy any toy for his daughter, whether it was a new Barbie doll, a scooter, or a new bicycle. As the family's trading business grew, so did their house. They added another floor, changed the furniture, expanded the yard, and installed a swimming pool. For little Mary, they built a small pool with steps where she could splash around under adult supervision in hot weather. Her childhood was carefree and pleasant. But one day, everything changed. That day they were going to a friend's wedding. Seth was worried, noticing that his spouse wasn't feeling as well as she claimed. "My dear, shall we stay at home? I can't watch you suffer." "Don't be silly, go without me. You haven't rested in so long. And Melanie and Zachary will be upset if neither of us attend their wedding. They won't forgive us." "We see them often enough as it is. They'll get over it. You're more important to me. Mary doesn't understand such events yet, and I won't be able to sit knowing that you're alone." "Don't be too overprotective of me," retorted Jennifer. "If I feel horrible, I'll call a doctor." "All right then. Take care of yourself. We'll get ready." Seth reluctantly agreed. So Seth got Mary in the car and they set off on a long journey. They had to spend more than 6 hours on the road. Seth, worried about his wife, left home later than he intended, and for half the distance he was already driving in the dark. When it was not more than 100 kilometers to the destination, Seth stopped at an inconspicuous gas station to refuel his car. But after driving only a couple of kilometers away from it, he was forced to stop in the middle of the forest, on the roadside, because he realized that he had a punctured wheel. "Damn, that's all I need," swore Seth quietly, looking back at his sleeping daughter. When he got out of the car, the man began to look at the car and think about what to do, and suddenly he noticed the headlights of the approaching car. The car stopped, and 3 men got out. Seth immediately realized that the flat tire didn't happen for nothing. "Hey man, what are you hiding in there? Give us your money, quickly," asked one of the attackers in a cocky tone. "Guys, I have nothing of value. Look for someone else," Seth replied simply. He didn't want to provoke a conflict, but he thought it was silly to appear unconvincing too. "Don't tell us what to do," the second attacker added, looking at Seth with a clear threat in his gaze. "Look, I don't want any trouble, but I don't have any money," said Seth, but he didn't realize there was no way to avoid trouble. The first blow hit him in the chest, and his breath caught quickly. Then 2 of them grabbed him, and the third began to beat him, to incapacitate him and stop his resistance. It ended with Seth being thrown almost unconscious into the ditch. After the impact with the ground, he passed out and remained lying there for some time. No one would have known his fate if a local elderly man, riding early into town on his bicycle, had not shown vigilance. "Are you alive? Hey man, wake up!" Elderly man was frightened and patted Seth's cheeks. But the beaten stranger did not open his eyes. Elderly man probed his pulse and made sure that he could still be saved. "We must go to the paramedic immediately," he muttered under his breath and rode his bicycle to the village. Meanwhile, the bandits did not notice that there was a little girl sleeping in the chair behind them. They drove all night to sell the stolen car to their accomplices and get money for it. When it dawned, one of the bandits who was driving the car turned around and only then noticed the sleeping girl. After quickly stopping and talking to the other bandits, they cut the seat belts that held the seat in place and dragged it out of the car with the sleeping girl. Leaving the seat on a deserted bus stop 400 kilometers away from the unforgettable gas station, they fled the scene of the crime. In the meantime, thanks to the actions of Michael, Seth survived but never regained consciousness. When Jennifer received a call from the police of an unfamiliar town, she was almost deprived of her senses. "Is Mr. Eldon your husband?" "Yes, and what happened?" Jennifer's heart immediately skipped a beat. The unbearable weight of the bad news came upon her. "He was found unconscious. He's in the hospital now. He's in a coma because of a head injury." Jennifer could hardly remember that time. Not only had her husband recovered for weeks, and the doctors gave no guarantees, but Mary was missing. The only person who could shed any light on her disappearance was in a coma. The family did everything possible to find their Mary, but no one knew where to look. "She's still a baby. She does not know anything except her name." Jennifer could not calm down. Grief consumed her completely. She was powerless, and Seth could not help her in any way. "My poor girl, where is she?" Mother's heart burst with pain. Her parents-in-law supported her, trying to appear strong, but the fear for the life of their own son and granddaughter did not go unnoticed. For 6 months, Seth was in a coma. Jennifer had long ago moved him to his hometown and provided the necessary care. She had to take over the management of the firm, which previously seemed beyond her strength. Seth's father, who had passed on his talent for exact sciences to his son, helped her get into the processes and gave her advice. In addition to taking care of the family, Jennifer tried to keep the business afloat so as not to go bankrupt. The bills for caring for her spouse were not insignificant. Seth regained consciousness just as the nurse was in his ward, and the attending physician appeared soon after. After an examination, it was clear that the head injury had not caused any changes in behavioral senses. "Oh, what a relief!" sobbed Jennifer, hugging her beloved husband, but she didn't know how to tell him about Mary. The news hit Seth hard, and grief overwhelmed him. "I'd rather be dead. I wish I had stayed and she hadn't gone. I couldn't keep her safe. I couldn't protect our baby," he exclaimed desperately. He realized that he had failed to protect neither himself nor his child, and now Mary was in an unknown place. "How did you bear it all alone?" he asked Jennifer, but she had no answer. "I don't know. I just lived and hoped that someday I would get a call saying that Mary was found." With Seth, it was easier to experience grief. Sometimes the spouses quarrelled, and cruel words flew from Jennifer's lips, blaming him for Mary's disappearance. Other times she blamed herself for not going to the wedding and not being with her daughter when Seth tried to fight off robbers. "We don't know how it could have been," he consoled her. A new round of investigations brought some hope to the couple. "We found your assailants," the investigator said over the phone. "They're being questioned now." "Thank you for letting me know. I'll be there soon," Seth replied. Despite Seth's connections keeping him informed about the investigation, it did not bring him any closer to his daughter. At the interrogation, it turned out that the bandits had no intention of attacking Seth specifically. They occasionally robbed travellers, but it was all light casual work. "We didn't know this man," said one of the assailants, unable to bear the pressure. "We saw him for the first time, and we didn't know anything about the daughter at all. Why do we need a 3-year-old girl? We just took the money out of his wallet and drove on. The car was left there in the woods." The rest of the gang said the same thing. Neither Seth nor Jennifer felt any relief after catching the attackers. They had hoped for an entirely different outcome from the interrogation. The last thread that connected with Mary was lost. Seth, I can't take it anymore. Where is she? Why isn't anyone thinking about the missing child? And why can't we do anything? We have so much money, but they don't give us anything useful, cried Jennifer, feeling her strength waning. The couple often fought, but they still held on to each other. Do you think we should give up? Seth asked carefully. I'm ready to fight to the end. It's my fault and I have to find her. Several years passed before Jennifer and Seth tried to conceive a second child, but Jennifer's weakened body and health problems had made conception difficult. They faced new problems, and Jennifer often cried and wailed after hysterics. Why is this happening to us? Have we ever hurt anyone enough to deserve this? No new medical devices or examinations with doctors could guarantee that Seth and Jennifer would be able to become parents again. They did not lose their determination, and for the next 3 years they continued to try, but none of their attempts brought the desired result. Jennifer and Seth were well known to a wide circle of people, many of whom were aware of the family tragedy. How are they holding up? People whispered when the spouses appeared at an event. I can't imagine how hard it's been for them. You wouldn't wish that kind of grief on anyone. The gossipers' tongues were still wagging. I heard that they tried to have another baby, but all in vain. What kind of family is there without children? What do they work so hard for? And who will they leave it all to? Many people were seriously concerned with the question of to whom Seth would pass all his fortune. Every year the success of his firm was growing, and he could compete with those who had never known of its existence before. But for Seth and Jennifer, their business became the only way to get away from their pain. They got busy with work, devoting all their time to it, burying themselves in it, and completely forgetting about the comfort of home. Business deals, contracts, reports, and new staff became much more important to them. However, business was no longer enjoyable and did not bring happiness. Over time, Jennifer began to realize that their once happy and promising marriage had become empty. Seth was still attentive to her, did not raise his voice, always listened to her and made gifts. But the spark was gone. The meaning was gone. It was just a way to kill time, nothing more. Seth, I want to talk to you, said Jennifer to Seth after dinner. I think you'll understand me because we always understand each other half-heartedly. I'm listening to you, said Seth, moving from the table to the sofa and taking his wife's hand. What is the topic? I want a child. You want one. Why don't we adopt him from the orphanage? We never considered that option because we thought we could manage on our own, but we couldn't. My life is empty. I don't enjoy it at all. I'm like a robot. Every day is the same and it's joyless. And I want to be a mother. Seth didn't even need time to think about it. I agree. Only, let's adopt a boy. Yes, a girl will be too painful, nodded Jennifer, who hugged her husband with a smile. Drew was almost 8 years old. The boy was stubborn and resentful. He had been growing up in an orphanage since he was 4 years old and had already learned the injustice of life to some extent. His birth parents were alcoholics, and they had no time to take care of him. He was sent to the street to beg because there was no food in the house, only booze. Neighbours fed the boy and constantly appealed to the social service, and soon Drew was taken away from his parents. His life in the orphanage was not sweet either. The other boys were cruel and liked to bully. That's why Drew grew up so uncontrollable, ready at any moment to react to someone else's action. But gradually, the participation of Jennifer and Seth in his life softened him and made him believe in them. Mr. Eldon, wake up! The first thing Seth saw when he opened his eyes was Mary's worried face. She was still as beautiful in her white festive dress. Jennifer was sobbing beside him, who, like her spouse, understood everything. Are you all right? Michael helped the man sit down and handed him a glass of water. Mum, "Dad, why are you crying?" A confused Drew looked at them. "Don't be afraid, sweetie." Mary stroked his cheek and pulled him close to her. "They're all right. They're just upset about the wedding. At a wedding, people always cry with happiness." But Drew was not satisfied with this answer. He did not believe that his parents cried from happiness with such faces. He saw their pain and embraced Jennifer. "You are our girl," Seth said faintly. "Are you sure they're adequate?" Michael whispered to his fiancée. "Should we call an ambulance? I don't like this." "Mary," Jennifer spoke up, "this pendant was given to you by your father on your 2nd birthday. It was him," she said, pointing to her husband. "You are our missing daughter, Mary." Jennifer burst into tears again. Michael sat Jennifer down at the table as well. He began to realize what was going on. "Are you saying you are Mary's biological parents?" he clarified. "Yes," the couple replied in weak voices. After the confession, the 4 of them retired to a separate room to discuss everything quietly. "I'll watch your boy," Mrs. Dawes volunteered, though she was terribly curious about what was going on. "I can't believe it," Mary said detached, coming to her senses after realizing what had happened. "You realized me just from the pendant, right? But you didn't know me at first sight." "Sweetheart, don't get upset." Michael patted her shoulder. "You were only 3, and now you're an adult. They couldn't have guessed." "You should know we never left you," Seth said. "The story is very complicated. When you disappeared, we searched for you for several years. We lost hope, but we kept seeking. The police prosecutor's office already hated us. It's hard for them to communicate with those who have lost children. They have to be cruel." The conversation was long and emotional. Everyone experienced a storm of emotions and thoughts and wanted to ask questions. The guests were sympathetic to the short absence. To be 100% sure of their relationship, Seth, Jennifer and Mary decided to take a DNA test to determine the degree of kinship. The result came in a few days. "Now we are officially relatives," Jennifer concluded, smiling awkwardly at her daughter. "I've dreamed of this day for so long." "Can we hug you?" Seth asked cautiously, spreading his arms apart. Mary answered them without words, stepped forward and hugged her family. She cried silently, reunited with her family. Michael was next to her and couldn't stop smiling with happiness for his beloved. After meeting her parents, Mary's life changed radically. Seth and Jennifer immediately looked for spacious housing in the city for their daughter and her husband. "You'll need a good place to live," Jennifer coaxed, alluding to the grandchild in Mary's belly and possible future children. "From here it will be convenient for you to go to any part of the city," nodded Seth, looking at the startled faces of the newlyweds. "Mr. Eldon, this is too spacious for us," Michael exclaimed. "On the contrary, it's just right for you," answered his father-in-law. "Nothing is to be spared for the happiness of children, and since she has chosen you, you are a worthy man. I see how dear she is to you, and how sincere you are with her. Besides, my grandchildren will grow up here. Don't stop them from enjoying it." Michael laughed and shook Seth's hand. He had seen how Mary had blossomed since meeting her mother and father. Her parents took care of the furniture, the family car, and even Michael's future. "If you're interested, I can help you find a job in the field you're interested in. I offered Mary a job in our company since she is an heiress. She will have to be trained, and I will personally take care of it. But for you, we have a place too. So decide," Mr. Eldon said. "Thank you. Mary and I will discuss it, and I will let you know." Mrs. Dawes' attitude had changed markedly. When she saw Mary in Michael's apartment, she almost burst with envy. "Oh my goodness," she gasped. "What a great place! And how will you live here with just the 3 of you? Why so much space? You'll get lost." "It seems like that to you now," replied Mary with a smile, "but you'll get used to it, and you won't notice the space." Now Mrs. Dawes proudly declared to her friends that her daughter-in-law was not a homeless orphan but a wealthy lady from a family of businessmen. She had softened considerably towards Mary after she had asked her parents to help Michael's father and pay for his surgery. "Of course," Seth replied, "we are relatives, after all. He has such serious health problems. You can't turn a blind eye." "Thank you," cried Mrs. Dawes. "We are indebted to you. You are so wonderful. Your daughter is also so wonderful." Mary wanted to laugh at how malleable Mrs. Dawes had become. Despite the abrupt change in her life, Mary justified her dad's hopes and was quickly drawn into the company's business. Even though she was pregnant, Mary accepted her post with all seriousness and worked with great dedication for the family business. Already in her second month in a senior position in her father's company, Mary was able to figure out the mole. He worked quietly, and because they were accustomed to him, the team did not arouse suspicion. But Mary seemed more attentive. "Well done, daughter," admired Seth. "You found out about the scoundrel in 2 steps. I took pity on him, gave him a job, and he tried to stab me in the back." Mary laughed, rejoicing at her success. Such luck gave her confidence, and the support of her relatives played a huge role. Mary's waters broke right at her workplace during a meeting. "I think the baby is going to see this world," Mary said, looking around her team with a frightened look. "Call Mr. Eldon," someone ordered. Soon Mary's relatives rushed to the clinic from different parts of the city. "When will it be over?" Michael paced the hallway nervously, looking for support from his loved ones. "It's not a quick matter," his mother answered. "You'd better have a snack, son. That will help to calm down a little." "I don't want to eat. How can I rest here when Mary is suffering right now?" "Darling, listen to your mother." Jennifer turned to him. "You can't help Mary. She is going through a natural process. Everything will be all right. The best doctors are here. They'll take care of her." Despite Jennifer's bravery, Seth held her hand because they were both worried. The changes in their lives had happened so rapidly that they didn't have time to get used to them. Having just acquired a son and daughter, now they were about to become grandparents. "I guess I've just become an uncle," said Drew when he saw the midwife coming towards them, smiling.